Melbourne, where guards were tasked to refill 2 automatic teller machines in a bunker inside that disused bank. Once the 2 guards had finished their security checks, Mohammed took up a position outside the bank to scan the street, while Rebecca retrieved 2 carry bags containing the money to use to refill the ATM machines.
And it was at this time, as she was just entering the disused bank, that Mohammed had seen to his right 2 men jump out of the back of a red-coloured ute. These 2 people were armed with firearms and wearing balaclavas. The driver was able to see in his mirrors the 2 offenders jumping out of the ute as well. He was aware instantly that these 2 men were there to rob them. He's then immediately driven from the scene, radioed his base and provided them with the details of the armed robbery as it was being committed. Both Rebecca and Mohammed then ran into the bank, into the bunker room, and in their haste haven't been in a position to lock the door.
The door to the bunker was flung open. A shot was fired, first by one of the offenders.
Give me the fucking money now, come on!
And threats and demands were made for the money that was inside the bunker in the carry bags. Mohammed then returned fire in self-defence, as did Rebecca.
Give me the money, boy, you go!
During the exchange of gunfire, the offenders were trying to reach inside the bunker to take the carry bags of cash. One of the bullets passed so close to Mohammed's head that he felt the shockwave and the heat of the bullet passing. At that point in time, Mohammed was in little doubt that he was going to die.
Mohammed realised that he was down to 1 round left in his firearm. He realised that on the next opportunity that the offender presented himself, he was going to fire upon him.
You fucking die!
There was silence in the bank, and Mohammed took this opportunity to reload his firearm. Then, one of the offenders screamed out, "You're going to die for this, boy, you're going to die."
You're gonna die, boy! Give me the money! Give me the fucking money now!
The offender reaches around the bunker room door again. Rebecca recalls seeing a yellow rigger's glove reach for the cash satchel. She takes aim and fires upon the offender, believing that she hits him.
There was a short pause, and it appeared to the guards that both offenders had left. They ran out the front in time to see the red ute driving down Racecourse Road. Mohammed tried to get the registration number, but it was too far ahead of him.
550 update, we got 2 offenders at least with handguns. We believe the offender was shot twice, we believe in the forearm. Roger.
The forensic team were immediately called in. If the offender had been shot, then his calling card may have been left behind.
Outside the bank, there was 2 pieces of wood located on the roadway. Those pieces of wood had a small amount of blood on them. There was also a small amount of blood on the tiles directly outside the bank as well. I collected swabs of that blood for DNA analysis, hopefully to identify the offender.
It was pretty clear to us that it was committed by people who have committed like crimes before, and we're hoping that whoever had committed the crime had been profiled and their blood was on the database.
As they waited for those results, the detectives followed more immediate leads.
A witness was actually riding his bicycle along Racecourse Road at the time of the armed robbery, and he saw 2 men wearing balaclavas and with guns run into the disused bank. This man actually believed there was a movie being made and went to investigate. He crossed Racecourse Road, went outside the bank and tried to look inside to see what was going on with this movie. Unfortunately, the sunlight glare on the glass didn't enable him to see inside the bank, but he heard a further number of gunshots. He then became a bit dubious as to whether, in fact, this was a movie or a real-life offence. He then moved away from the front of the bank, and as he did so, The two offenders fled the bank on foot, ran to the red Ford utility and drove off in Racecourse Road. This man obtained the registration number of the Ford utility.
Yeah, Flemington 252. I'll give you a description of the vehicle. The red Ford Ute, Delta Victor Charlie 574.
A quick check unsurprisingly discovered that the red Ute had been stolen. And within minutes, it had been found. But would there be enough forensic evidence left to catch their violent offenders?
Police are on the lookout for a gunman shot during an armed robbery this morning. $150,000 in cash was stolen when two balaclava-clad bandits ambushed guards during a routine delivery to refill a teller machine.
The shots all occurred inside the bank. There was no risk to passer-bys, but it's certainly dangerous and a brazen attempt by the offenders.
I was notified by the crime scene unit to attend the scene of a shooting at an armed hold-up in Flemington. On arrival, I found that the scene literally looked like the shootout at the OK Corral.
Give me the money, boy!
There were 14 impact marks located within the area of the bank, and based on the damage left by the impact and the location of the two security officers and the two offenders, it was possible to determine that 6 shots had been fired by the male security guard, 4 shots had been fired by the female security guard, and 4 shots had been fired by the offender's revolver, 2 in the concrete floor, and a further 2 shots fired into the bunker, 1 striking the ATM machine and the other striking the wall above the head of the male security officer.
But when the crime scene examiners collected the cartridges and bullets in the bank, it accounted for 16 shots.
That left 2 shots unaccounted for. It is possible that those 2 bullets have struck an offender and those bullets remained within the body or passed through to be caught up within the clothing.
The injured offender, who had left drops of blood on the footpath outside the bank, had escaped with his associate in a red Ute, and that vehicle had just been found.
416, we found the car. It's on fire in Mulgrave Street.
3.500, we've got at least 3 to 4 witnesses here who've chased the offenders.
When we arrived at Mulgrave Street at that secondary scene, we were approached by a witness who stated he was driving along Racecourse Road at the time the armed robbery was being committed. He stated he saw the 2 offenders leaving the bank and jumping into the red Ute. It was then that he decided to do a U-turn and began to follow this vehicle. He followed the red Ute into Eastwood Street and then into Mulgrave Street. And at one stage he actually thought about ramming that vehicle, but seeing the guns, he thought better of it. He then saw the red Ute crash into the fence post. He was able to see the taller one getting into the back tray. One of the offenders at this stage had taken his balaclava off, but the witness was too far away to actually get any sort of detailed description. He then saw the shorter offender pour liquid all over it and then set the vehicle alight. The offender returned and reached into the back of the now burning Ute and grabbed out what the witness described as a bag or something similar. So he then watched in amazement as this man ran off down the laneway carrying a bag with one hand and trying to put out the fire with the other.
We've got 2 male offenders on foot who've headed south down the laneway off Mulgrave Street.
It was clear that it was the intention of the offenders to deliberately light the fire in an attempt to destroy all forensic evidence. But unfortunately for them, the fire wasn't that successful. There were several clues left to investigators, being the wardrobe that was partially burnt, and the 3 firearms in the ute. I think it was not the intention of the offenders to leave these firearms in the utility. It was the sheer panic and the injuries sustained by one of the offenders during the armed robbery, where they've cleanly forgotten to take the firearms with them.
610 Portable, we've got a trail of blood down the laneway. Permission from the 250 unit to follow that blood trail instead of waiting for a dog received.
Roger, Flemington 252, go.
252, permission granted.
2 bits south of the ute, where it had crashed into a fence, there was a laneway. The laneway ran through to Smith Street. In that laneway there was a blood trail that indicated one fender had been bleeding, and the amount of blood and the nature of it indicated that the offender had a substantial wound. We collected samples of that blood for subsequent DNA analysis. The blood trail ended abruptly at Smith Street, indicating that a further getaway vehicle may have been used.
There's a pool of blood. It looks like they stopped here for a split second and maybe stolen another car.
On the day of the robbery, we were contacted by the Armed Defenders Squad. I was asked to attend an address in Smith Street, Flemington. A witness had seen the 2 offenders running down a laneway and getting into a car outside a house.
I've got a basic description of both those males.
16, go.
One's around 185 centimetres tall.
She told me that she'd seen 2 males. One of them had a balaclava on. The other male had nothing on his face, and she saw his face quite clearly.
Second male, about 173 centimetres tall, finished to medium build. He was late 30s to 40s with short, straight, dark-coloured hair.
I then conducted an interview with her to create a facial image of this male that was not wearing the balaclava. We produced the face, piecing it together like a jigsaw puzzle. We'll start off with the most distinctive feature of the face that the witness can remember, whether it be a hairstyle, a jaw shape, and we will then build that jigsaw puzzle together until we come up with a complete image.
Creating the face image could take between 1 hour and a day, and so another significant observation by the witness was out on the police airwaves.
All units, callers come through. Description of second vehicle that has been stolen. Registration is similar to Oscar Double Victor 442. Described as a white Holden Commodore mid-80s. Rego comes up to expired 83 Mitsubishi sedan from a car yard in Benalla.
So then we started to wonder whether the plates had actually been stolen or the details that we'd been given were actually incorrect at the time. That led us to make a number of further inquiries and run variations of the number plates in relation to the numbers and letters that had been provided. As a result of these inquiries, it led to the discovery of a station wagon that had been stolen from the Middle Park area approximately 3 weeks earlier with the registration QVV 442.
The mistake, though minor, had meant the offenders were well ahead of the police. But they had picked the wrong car to steal and the wrong exit to escape. Within minutes of the robbery, the detectives knew they were dealing with professionals. But in stealing the $150,000 cash, one had been injured. Police now had alerts in local hospitals and were actively seeking the whereabouts of the second getaway vehicle.
In the hours following the armed robbery, we released a whereabouts desired in relation to the stolen Holden station wagon, QVV 442. One of the avenues of inquiry that actually produced some information for investigators was an e-tag system on the new tollway in Melbourne, whereby a vehicle is fitted with a tag and it pings off a gantry on the roadway and they pay a toll. In the event that a car doesn't have an e-tag, it's recorded that the vehicle has passed the tollway without paying the appropriate fee. In this instance, we established that the Holden Commodore station wagon had travelled on the Balti Bridge along the tollway and had been captured by camera because they had not paid the appropriate fee.
Only 10 minutes after the robbery, the offenders had entered the tollway, and this road fed to a number of outer suburban areas. So as local patrols kept a lookout for the second stolen vehicle, the first was being inspected.
At this point in the inquiry, we were no closer to identifying who the offenders were responsible for that armed robbery. We returned to the yard where the stolen Ford utility had been secured to examine that for evidence that may have been in the vehicle that will assist us in identifying who the offenders are. When we got to the Ford utility, we identified there was rope and a pair of rigger's gloves we believed to be worn by the offenders during the commission of the armed robbery. And when we spoke to the owner of the red Ford utility, the owner identified to us that a number of wheels and tyres that had been in the car when it was stolen were no longer there, and also told us that remnants of a burnt wardrobe that were in the back of the utility did not belong to him.
We re-canvassed the neighbours from where the cars were stolen from. We weren't able to turn up anything else to enlighten us to the identity of the offenders involved.
However, the guns that had been left behind in the burning ute were giving them a strong lead.
About a week after the armed robbery, the ballistic section contacted us and gave us information about the 3 firearms that were found in Mulgrave Street with the utility. They advised us that the 2 firearms, being the 12-gauge shotgun and the .22 rifle, had their serial numbers ground out. What they did tell us was the serial number in the revolver was able to be retrieved, and they linked that to an armed robbery that had been committed in January of 2001.
That was only 5 weeks before the one they were currently investigating.
Security guards and bank customers were forced to the ground at gunpoint last night when thieves robbed an Armourguard van in Toorak.
This armed robbery was committed in similar circumstances in the fact that the 2 armed guards were about to do a refill on an ATM in Toorak when they were ambushed by 2 offenders at gunpoint. The guards, during the course of this armed robbery, were forced to the ground and had one of their firearms stolen, as well as the cash that they were about to refill that ATM with.
Once we discovered that the revolver used in the Flemington armed robbery was stolen from a guard in a previous armed robbery, we were confident that we were dealing with offenders who had committed at least one other, if not more, armed robberies prior to the Flemington armed robbery.
Their assumption appeared true. Like the gun, the blood found outside the bank had brought up a connection to another robbery, one that had remained unsolved for 5 years.
The circumstances of that burglary were that 2 offenders had broken in after hours into the shopping centre itself. Had gone to the jewellery shop, broken an internal window and entered into the premises itself. They then smashed several of the display cabinets, and during the course of that, one of the offenders has cut himself. Upon investigating that jewellery burglary, the investigating police member obtained a sample of the blood. The jewellery burglary itself was a reasonably well-planned and executed burglary. A sum of about $50,000 worth of jewellery was taken.
The problem was that while the blood from this jewellery heist and the robbery matched each other, it had not uncovered a criminal from the DNA database. The good news was that the face image had been completed.
We put out a face system of one of the offenders together with a detailed description of the armed robbery to all police in Victoria and to armed robbery investigators in other states of Australia. It wasn't long before information started coming back into us that identified a number of persons of interest.
As a result of the internal email that we'd sent out, which detailed the fact that an offender was injured and may be seeking medical treatment, we received information from our Crime Stoppers and local police in Rye that they had information that a person by the name of Brian Gardner of the Rye area was in fact sourcing medical treatment. Brian Gardner was known to the members of the Armed Offender Squad, although his history mainly consisted of burglaries and lower type offences. In the early stages, he wasn't considered a suspect owing to the escalation and violence of the armed robbery in Flemington. On the receipt of that information from Crime Stoppers in Rye, he became our #1 priority.
When detectives did a check on Gardner's address in Rye, they came up with several alternatives. Each needed to be checked out. But the Armed Offenders Squad had other ideas than simply knocking on each door.
One of the considerations is that the Armed Offender Squad is searching for a person who is probably armed, is desperate and injured, and has displayed the propensity to use the firearm to prevent apprehension. Because of that, forced entry techniques are used to gain entry to the addresses.
The first premises we searched with our 20-pound key, also known as a sledgehammer, turned up no one was in that premises. Over the course of the next couple of hours, we then searched a number of houses, which again failed to locate Gardner at any of those.
Was it possible that this prime suspect had flown the coop? Had word got out of the squad's arrival? Or did the police have the wrong intelligence? The Armed Offenders Squad had raided several properties in which they believed their prime suspect may be hiding. Each was unsuccessful.
We cordoned off the area of Rye, ensuring that all the entry and exit points to it were covered by Armed Offenders Squad personnel, in case word had got around to Gardner that we were in fact searching for him and he couldn't leave the area and flee. We did have several other known addresses, so we then had those premises set off, and by that I mean we had members from the Armed Offender Squad conduct surveillance on those premises to see who came and who left.
One of those houses was proving interesting.
The two members were watching the address. They saw a vehicle leave the premises. It contained two males. They then followed that vehicle a number of kilometres. The vehicle was intercepted.
They then called upon the occupants of the car to leave the car. Of course, this is done at gunpoint, having consideration for the fact that we believe that one of them may be Brian Gardner and he probably will be armed.
One of the squad members then approached the back of the car where he saw a person to be seen there covered in what appeared to be a white sheet. He was called upon also to get out of the car but stated he couldn't. Again, he was called upon, responding, "I can't, I'm fucked, my arms don't work."
Are you Brian Gardner?
The squad member identified this person to be Brian Gardner. We finally caught our man.
So they then secured him and took the sheet off and searched for firearms, which they found none. At that stage, they observed that his injuries consisted of his right arm being in a sling and his left arm all bandaged up. He was then removed from the vehicle and then placed under arrest. The arresting members of Brian Gardner then asked him about how and the circumstances of how he got his injuries, and he explained to them that he was shot through his left arm, which went through. He explained that he was shot in his right arm as well, but he believed that the bullet was still stuck in there and it had broken his bones. He stated to them he had no great plan in regards to getting medical treatment, he just hoped they'd get better. Gardner was then immediately conveyed to the Frankston Hospital, accompanied by two members of the Armed Offender Squad. Whilst being treated at the Frankston Hospital for his injuries, Gardner admitted to the investigating members that he'd been shot by security. He didn't admit any circumstances of the armed robbery, location of the money or who the co-offender was. So at this stage we're back to square one and we needed forensic evidence to link him to the crime.
Investigators obtained a swab from Gardner whilst in hospital, and this would be used to establish a DNA profile of Gardner and hopefully establish whether he was a person who deposited the blood at the crime scene in Flemington.
Brian Gardner then went under surgery and a bullet was removed. It had completely shattered on entry and so would be of no evidential value in the case. So as detectives eagerly waited for results of the DNA tests, the house Gardner was seen leaving was being searched.
As a result of a search on that address, we found numerous painkillers, bandages, associated items in his bedroom, which he'd clearly been using to treat his injuries. Of significance, we also found a fat boy Harley Davidson in the lounge room. This bike appeared brand new, which showed to us that he'd come into some recent wealth. We then questioned his wife about that, and she said that they'd loaned a sum of about $25,000 to purchase that Harley Davidson. Again, we found this strange in the circumstances.
We spoke with the previous owner of the motorcycle and obtained an amount of information from him. He told us that Gardner had tendered at his home address to buy the Harley Davidson some 2 weeks before the armed robbery. Gardner had paid a small deposit and told the owner of the motorcycle they didn't have all the money but would get it shortly, and when he did, he would return and complete the sale of the motorcycle. Gardner then left. A couple of days after the armed robbery, Gardner's wife went back to where the Harley-Davidson motorcycle was and again spoke to the owner and paid cash, a total of about $25,000 in $50 notes to the owner of the motorcycle.
Yeah, I love this bike.
In conversation, in passing, Gardner's wife did mention to the owner that she couldn't wait to get it back to the home address so that Gardner would feel better when he saw it.
So with the discovery of the bike, that explained at least $25,000 from the armed robbery. We still had a sum of money still outstanding. At this stage, we still had no idea where or what he had done with that money.
In a bedside hearing, Gardner was charged with attempted murder, armed robbery and the theft of vehicles. And it wasn't long before that news was heard on the grapevine.
The night of Brian Gardner's arrest turned out to be busier than expected. Investigators were notified later that evening that the vehicle that they were still searching for, the white Holden station wagon, had been located at the back of the bank in the rear car park, partially burnt out.
It wasn't possible that the vehicle had been abandoned there before this night. This area was regularly patrolled. It's a very common area, which is patrolled by the local police on a fairly regular basis. We were quite happy with the fact that it was left there that night.
There were two trains of thinking at this point in time. It was either the offender had thought that he had to get rid of all evidence still in his possession at this point in time, or it was a clear taunt to police, catch me if you can.
Are you Brian Gardner? Are you Brian Gardner? Yes.
Brian Gardner was currently under police guard in hospital. So too was the white station wagon that had been used as a getaway vehicle in the armed robbery. It had just been found, dumped and partially burnt.
Inside the station wagon, we found a number of tyres, pieces of wood. I found pieces of wood that had a floral pattern on them and some money boxes. The money boxes were the kind of boxes that are used to fill auto tellers, and they had labels indicating they were for the Flemington auto tellers. A large vinyl bag was also found in the rear of the car, and that was what the money boxes would have been normally been carried in. In the front passenger area of the car, we located a substantial amount of blood, which indicated that the person who had been sitting there had bled quite severely. I took a DNA swab of that blood for further analysis.
We formed the belief that the blood would have been put there by Brian Gardner as he sat in the passenger seat, being driven by his co-offender from the Flemington area after the armed robbery. We took the owner of the station wagon to view the property in the station wagon to identify what, if any, of the property was his. He told us that the parts of the wardrobe, the wheels and tyres, and the tins and bag certainly were not his.
As well as having the owner of the stolen station wagon examine his vehicle, we had the owner of the stolen ute come and attend as well. He stated to us that the tyres that were in the back of the station wagon were the ones, in fact, that were in his ute when it was stolen.
The unsuccessful lighting of the fire meant that police now had a direct link between the two stolen vehicles. There was also the likelihood that the blood from the crime scene, the blood now found in the wagon, and the mouth swab from Gardner would all match. But as yet, there were no links or clues to his co-offender.
We're still no closer to identifying who the second offender was. We're then going through a process of eliminating a list of persons of interest or including them in the inquiry when we received a phone call from the Alternate police station. A person by the name of Michael Coates had presented himself to the police station saying the armed offender squad wanted to talk to him about the armed robbery in Flemington.
We thought this was unusual. Why would someone present themselves to the police station if they had no knowledge of the armed robbery? It was a very curious thing for us and obviously something we had to explore.
On arrival at Altona North Police Station, I observed that Michael Coates was quite similar to both the build described and the face image provided by the witness from Flemington. As a result, Michael Coates was placed under arrest in the event that any admissions he's made could be produced in court at a later date.
I intend to interview you in relation to the offence of armed robbery. Before continuing, I must inform you that you're not obliged to say or do anything, but anything you say or do may be given into evidence. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
During the formal interview of Michael Coates, the clear question to me was, why had he come to police? During this interview process, he said he'd read a newspaper article that a man had been injured during an armed robbery in Flemington. The man had been located in the Rye area and had gunshot wounds.
Now, I am a suspicious person by nature, and I thought it might be someone I know, and thought, well, if it is, you'll be around to see me. No one came around to see me. Someone came round at 9 o'clock this morning and said that you people were after me, so I came to see you.
That person, was that a police officer?
No.
Okay, just so we're not speaking in riddles and we understand, the newspaper article, who did you, in your own mind, who did you think that person to be?
No comment.
Okay, Mike, I'd just like to put some allegations to you in relation to why you have been arrested. It's alleged that on the 25th of January 2002, an armed robbery took place at the disused Commonwealth Bank complex. Flemington, what can you tell me about that?
No comment.
Did you have any involvement in the commission of that armed robbery?
No comment.
Do you know any person that did have any involvement in that armed robbery?
No comment.
Mike, was it your intention to answer no comment to the rest of my questions in relation to that armed robbery?
Correct.
I was somewhat baffled that this person had presented himself to a police station saying that we wanted to speak to them and that he would answer questions, then exercising his right to not answer those questions.
I just couldn't work out why this man presented himself, then wanted to play cat and mouse with us. It was really quite strange at the time.
I'll move on in relation to some questions in relation to forensic procedures.
We asked him if he would present his arm so we could do an inspection to see if there was any evidence available that would be consistent with that of the second offender. As he's rolled up the cardigan arm to his right arm, lo and behold, we find a burn mark that's consistent with that of the second offender may have received when he was reaching into the rear of the utility to get the cash bag out of the car. He said he'd received it during a Sandy accident during the repair of a motor vehicle. We organised for the forensic medical officer to come in and to view that injury, and she said that it was consistent with a recent burn. We couldn't believe Michael Coates could be so stupid to present himself. He now fitted the description and had an injury consistent with the second offender.
Police had two suspects. Gardner, who admitted being shot, but not admitting that he had been at the armed robbery. And now Michael Coates, who had turned himself in, but hadn't. So in this cat and mouse game, they needed to find solid evidence. Luckily for police, Coates had driven in that day.
Michael Coates also gave me the keys to his car, and when I searched the car, I found in the glove box of the car a lease agreement to an address in Lock Street, Yarraville. Of particular interest in this lease agreement were the dates on the lease agreement. They extended prior to and just after the armed robbery committed in Flemington. The real estate agent also supplied us with information relating to the lease agreement, and on that lease agreement, Brian Gardner was noted as a referee of Michael Coates.
Michael Coates had just walked into a police station, saying that the armed offenders squad were looking for him. They weren't, but his appearance had now led them to search a house he had rented during the period that the armed robbery had occurred.
We then searched the premises in Lock Street, Yarraville. We found a number of significant items in that premises, things including bloodstaining on the floor near the back door, a pair of bloodstained tennis shoes, bandages which appeared to be bloodstained in the lounge and living areas of that premises. And of significance, we found a cupboard, and in that cupboard was a very distinctive green patterned floral adhesive, which matched that of the wardrobes and cupboards we recovered from the stolen station wagon.
Not only were the shelves a link between the house and the white Commodore, but forensic investigators were also finding links between the house, the white Commodore, and the ute.
When I compared the property located in both of the stolen vehicles, the ute and the station wagon, there were remnants of wardrobe in both. There was a particular type of hinge found in both of the vehicles, having a U shape and also being painted white over green. The same design was used for both hinges. It showed that they were probably from the same era and possibly even from the same cabinet.
In the laneway, not far from the house, there was further evidence. More remnants of a wardrobe. the frame of which was identical to that from the ute. And if there was any doubt these discarded wooden items didn't belong to the property, the owners of the house were about to put a stop to that.
They were able to tell us that they had 3 cupboards missing. The same 3 cupboards had the distinctive green floral pattern adhesive on them. Those wardrobes in particular belonged to that address. That address at the time being rented by Michael Coates had all married up together.
And the links didn't stop there.
In the garage, which was attached to the rear of the premises, we found a piece of rope. That rope was immediately recognisable as being the same kind that we recovered in the back of the red ute.
This rope had the same dimensions and the same twist and structure as the rope from the ute. So therefore, I could conclude that it was likely that they may have originated from the same source.
Also in the garage were tyre impressions. One perfectly matched the tyre tread found on the white Commodore station wagon. But this car wasn't the only one linked to the property.
Members of the Armed Offenders Squad canvassed residents in Lock Street, Yarraville, and from that they identified a number of witnesses. One of whom observed a gold-coloured Ford Fairlane sedan parked at the front of the Lock Street address in the days prior to and after the armed robbery in Flemington. It was also seen that a person had retrieved what appeared to be a gun case from the back of the Ford Fairlane and taken it inside the Lock Street address. Of significance, the person described was not dissimilar in appearance to Brian Gardner. Brian Gardner had in fact owned a 1979 Ford Fairlane sedan and it was gold in colour.
As a further part of checking the surrounding area of Lock Street, Yarraville, we came across a medical centre. We established that Michael Coates had in fact been to that location on several occasions post the armed robbery. And received several scripts for painkillers. That was significant to us for the fact that it was pretty clear that those painkillers were bought in an effort to assist Gardner who'd been shot.
Brian Gardner and Michael Coates were definitely linked to the house. But more importantly, when the DNA results came back from Gardner's mouth swab, it was a perfect match to items in the house, to the blood in the white Commodore, to the laneway near where the ute had been burnt, and outside the bank.
Brian Gardner had already been arrested and charged for the armed robbery and attempted murder of the 2 security guards. The blood sealed the case. Michael Coates, on the other hand, had been charged only as an accessory, but that was about to change.
Having obtained all the evidence we had from Lock Street and the associated evidence, we then attended at the Smith Street address and spoke to the witness who saw the unmasked offender on the day of the armed robbery in question. We showed her a series of photographs in which she was able to identify positively Michael Coates as being the person she saw in the laneway on the day of that armed robbery. We now had significant evidence to link Michael Coates to his involvement in the commission of that armed robbery.
We then went out to the Mount Street address, rearrested him and took him to the office of the Armed Offenders Squad, where we gave him the opportunity to explain his actions if he wished to do so.
Okay, Michael, it's alleged that you and the company with Brian Gardner attended at the disused bank, whereby you confronted 2 armoured guard employees doing an automatic telling machine refill. What do you have to say to that?
Wasn't, mate.
It's also alleged, Michael, that during this gunfight, that a quantity of cash in the vicinity of $150,000 was stolen from the guards at this time. What do you have to say to that?
I know nothing about that.
It's further alleged, Michael, that during this time you have fled with Gardner to a stolen Ford utility, red in colour, that was parked out the front of the branch, registration DVC 574. What do you have to say to that?
It wasn't me.
This armed robbery was clearly well planned and well executed until the point where Brian Gardner was shot. At that point in time, things went tragically wrong. Their escape didn't go smoothly. They crashed the red utility, they set that on fire, they leave the guns behind. Initially they leave the money behind. Michael Coates catches himself on fire. It all went wrong. They weren't in a position to dispose of the secondary vehicle. They had to hang on to that. Nothing went right from the time that they left the bank.
Michael Coates was informally charged with armed robbery, attempted murder and theft in relation to the 2 cars used in the armed robbery and of the $150,000 stolen during the course of the armed robbery. He was then remanded in custody to spend time with Brian Gardner.
Do you wish to say anything in answer to the charge?
No comment.
Do you wish to make a further statement in relation to this matter?
No.
I really have no reason why Michael Coates contacted police on the day when he presented himself at Altona North. There's obviously several schools of thought. One was that he was that arrogant that he believed that whatever we were able to find out would never be able to link him to the case in question. It still baffles me, and I'm sure sitting where he is now, he'll have a lot of time to think about it. It certainly was his undoing by presenting himself to the police on that day.
At their trial, both men contested the attempted murder charge. But Gardner, unlike his co-accused, pleaded guilty to the armed robbery and the theft of the vehicles. They were found guilty of those 2 charges, but acquitted on the attempted murder.
Gardner was sentenced to 8 years imprisonment and Coates was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. The Victorian Director of Public Prosecutions later appealed the leniency of these sentences, and the appeal was upheld, and new sentences of 11 years was imposed with a non-parole period of 8 years. Both Coates and Gardner are eligible for parole in the year 2010.
Gardner was charged with the jewellery burglary, where he pleaded guilty and received a 12-month term of imprisonment. Unfortunately, we weren't able to produce enough evidence for the Turek armed robbery, and that case remains open.
The 2 security guards involved in the Flemington armed robbery have left their jobs. Brian Gardner, who caused them to be so traumatised, has, as a result of his actions, been left with a damaged right arm. He may never be able to ride a Harley again. The remainder of the money...
London, a city of 9 million windows and one unblinking eye. It watches everything, remembers nothing, and swallows stories whole. Some bien mat quietly jua sung mu, mating tet kong ai nghe te. Others linger. They cling to brick walls, to narrow alleyways, to the late-night hum of the underground. This is one of those stories, a headline frozen in time, a case file that never closed, a name that should have faded but never did. London, 1985, cold case, allegedly solved, and yet nothing about it feels finished. It is November and the city is damp and restless. Rain sits low over the rooftops, a gray lid pressing down on everything. Neon signs buzz in shop windows along Holloway Road, red double-deckers hiss at the curb, and the air tastes like exhaust and cigarette smoke. The streets are crowded but lonely, busy but distracted. Margaret Thatcher is on the front page. Strikes and scandals jam the news. The pound is unstable and the world feels off balance. But tonight the cameras are not rolling for politicians. Tonight the spotlight will lock onto a single figure moving quietly through the noise, a face that could be anyone's, a name that will become a whispered warning. Her name is Emily Ward, 23 years old, library assistant at the Islington Central Library. Brown hair cut just below the chin, a cheap wristwatch with a scratched face, a red wool scarf that doesn't match her coat but means something to her because her younger brother gave it to her last Christmas. She rents a small top-floor bedsit on Tollington Way, the kind of place where the wallpaper curls at the edges and the neighbors know each other only by footsteps on the stairs. She is not rich, not famous, not dangerous. She is the person you pass on the pavement and forget 3 seconds later, until the night you can't. That morning, nothing feels remarkable. The radio on her bedside table crackles out a pop song and a burst of news about unemployment figures. She hits the snooze once, then swings her legs out of bed, feet landing on a rug that never quite lies flat. Kettle on, 2 slices of toast, tea, no sugar. Out the window, the sky is the color of dirty dishwater. Emily watches a bus roar past, sees her reflection in the glass. Tired eyes, pale skin, the ghost of someone still figuring herself out. She almost stays home. She almost calls in sick. Almost. Instead, she pulls on her navy coat, wraps that red scarf twice around her neck, and grabs her black leather handbag from the chair. She checks her watch. 8:14. She hates being late. She locks the door, hears the familiar click of the deadbolt, and heads down the narrow stairwell that smells faintly of fried onions and old carpet cleaner. At street level, London hits her full force. Car horns, chatter, the distant wail of a siren. She blends into it, just one more silhouette moving toward the day. At the library, it is quiet in the way only paper and dust can be quiet. Emily slips behind the front desk, stacks returned books, stamps due dates, answers questions about opening times and local history archives. She smiles politely, never too much, never too little. Her coworker, Janet, makes a joke about the weather and the queue of late fees. Emily laughs, but it is soft, inward, as if she's saving something for later. Tung chi tit nya, bin tung, nyam chang, yung dala diu hin mai trin trunin kong kipon. Nothing about this day is marked as special. There is no drum roll, no omen, no glitch in the rhythm. At 5 p.m., the library lights fade into a softer glow, closing time creeping closer. People drift out, coats buttoned, collars raised against the cold. At 5:30 p.m., the last patron leaves. Janet waves from the door, shouting back that she's catching the earlier bus. Emily finishes reshelving a small pile of crime novels, slides the last one into place, and glances at the clock. 5:42. She signs the logbook, flicks off the backroom light, and steps outside, locking the front door behind her with a practiced twist of the key. The temperature has dropped. The streetlights have come up, halos of orange in the mist. Traffic is thicker now, headlights cutting slick lines across wet asphalt. Emily tucks her chin into her scarf and heads toward the tube. Somewhere above, a helicopter thuds across the sky. Somewhere behind, a door slams, a dog barks, a phone rings. Everyday noises that will later sound like clues when replayed in people's heads. She walks past the same newsagent she always passes, and the man behind the counter nods at her without thinking. Later, he will be asked to repeat that nod for detectives, to remember everything about the way she moved, what she wore, whether she looked afraid. He will fail, because that moment right now feels like nothing. On Holloway Road Underground Station, the air is damp and metallic, the tiled walls sweat condensation. A busker's melancholy guitar drifts from the far end of the tunnel, almost drowned out by the squeal of brakes and the robotic announcement of the next train. Emily taps her card, moves through the turnstile, and descends into the crowd. She stands on the right side of the escalator, letting people rush past her on the left, their briefcases and bags knocking her elbow. On the platform, she chooses her spot like she always does. 3 steps back from the yellow line, opposite the third pillar from the far end. Routine, reliable, predictable. Witnesses will later give versions of what happens next, their accounts overlapping in some places and tearing apart in others. One remembers a young woman with a red scarf standing alone, staring at the advertisement for a holiday to Spain. Another swears she was talking to a tall man in a brown overcoat, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. A third insists she saw the woman get on the train alone, head down, shoulders hunched, clutching her handbag tight. CCTV is patchy, grainy, and mostly useless. It's 1985. Cameras exist, but they are rare, unreliable, and pointed in all the wrong directions. There will be no crisp freeze frame, no viral image shared millions of times. Just blurred shapes and darkness swallowing detail. The train roars into the station at 6:02 p.m., wind pushing dust into people's faces. Doors grind open, bodies surge forward, others spill out. For a second, the whole platform is chaos, a human tide flowing in opposite directions. Somewhere in that crush, Emily Ward steps into the carriage, or she doesn't. Somewhere in that split second, she moves one way or another, takes one decision, follows one voice. When the doors slide shut again, she is still visible to some people's memory, already disappearing in others. The train pulls away, lights streaking into blackness. She should be home by 6:30. She should be boiling water for pasta, listening to the top 40 countdown, maybe phoning her mother on the payphone in the hallway outside her bedsit. Instead, by 7:15, her absence begins to tighten around the people who know her. Her mother, in a small house miles away, stares at the clock and tells herself she'll call tomorrow instead. Her landlord, halfway through a football match on TV, hears the front door remain stubbornly silent and doesn't think twice. Only one person notices sharply, her younger brother, Daniel, 14 years old, who had been promised a phone call about his school play. He waits by the phone until his eyes sting. No ring, no explanation, just an empty hallway and a dial tone. By 10 p.m., the city has moved on. Pubs are emptying. Last orders ring out. Taxis circle like sharks around the West End. Somewhere a couple fights in a doorway. Somewhere else, a glass smashes. In a small police station a few miles from Holloway, a desk sergeant listens to a worried voice on the other end of the line. A missing adult, female, 23, last seen leaving work. No history of running away, no boyfriend she might have disappeared with. The sergeant makes a note, tags it low priority. Adults go missing all the time. Most come back, most don't end up as headlines. At 6:11 a.m. the next morning, a bin lorry turns into a narrow service alley behind a row of shops off Seven Sisters Road. The sky is a murky blue-gray, the kind of half-light where anything can look like anything. The driver kills the engine. The refuse collector in the high-vis jacket jumps down from the back, pulls on his gloves, and moves toward the row of overflowing bins. He is thinking about the cold, about the cup of tea he'll have on his break, about nothing important. Then he sees it. At first, it looks like just another torn black bag slumped against the brick wall. Then the shape resolves, the color registers, not black plastic, dark wool, skin, hair. He freezes, one hand still on the handle of the bin. The alley shrinks around him. There, half propped against the wall as if someone had tried to sit her up and failed, is a young woman. Her coat is soaked dark, her hair matted, her head tilted at an impossible angle. One shoe missing, one hand bare, the other still gloved. Her red scarf is wrapped around her neck, but not the way scarves are meant to be worn. It is twisted, tight, digging into bruised flesh. Her eyes are open, staring past him at a point he cannot see. The scream never quite leaves his throat. It becomes a hoarse shout, a stuttering string of syllables that don't make sense. The driver comes running. Then the shopkeeper at the corner hears the noise, opens his back door, and sees the scene. Within minutes, the alley is filling with uniforms, radios, and the sharp smell of adrenaline. Yellow tape appears as if from nowhere, roping off the scene. Curious faces gather at the mouth of the alley, their expressions a mixture of horror and hunger. News spreads like fire. Body found behind shops. Young woman, strangled. Detective Inspector Howard Lang arrives at 6:54 a.m. He is in his 40s, graying at the temples, a man who has seen enough of London's dark corners to know this will not be simple. He ducks under the tape, nods to the uniformed sergeant, and stops a few feet from the body. The crime scene photographer is already at work, camera clicking, flash popping, freezing this moment from every angle. Lang takes it in quietly, the position of the body, the missing shoe, the scarf, the way her handbag has been placed carefully by her side as if someone didn't want it to get dirty. He squats down, careful not to touch anything. There is a watch on her wrist, its glass cracked, its hands stopped dead at 6:13. Later, they will argue about what that means. Time of death, moment of impact, or just coincidence. Her handbag is zipped. Inside, they will find a library ID card with her name on it, Emily Ward, a paperback novel, a packet of mints, a ticket stub from Holloway Road Station stamped 1801. Everything ordinary, everything wrong. The pathologist murmurs something about ligature marks, about petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes, about signs of a struggle. No obvious sexual assault, but they won't know for sure until the post-mortem. There are faint abrasions on her knuckles, as if she tried to fight back. No blood spatter on the walls, no obvious drag marks on the ground. Whoever did this knew what they were doing or got very, very lucky. Lang listens, but his mind is already running ahead, drawing lines between the tube station, the alley, the empty bed, and a North London bedsit. Somewhere along that line is the second where everything went wrong. By mid-morning, the first headlines are out. Young woman strangled in North London alley. City shocked by brutal killing. They don't have a name yet, so they invent one. Library girl. It sounds clean, harmless, easy to read over coffee, easy to forget. But people don't forget. Not this time. In the flats above the shops, residents peer through curtains. Parents pull their children a little closer on the walk to school. Office workers clutch their handbags tighter. Talk show hosts ask the same questions on the radio. How safe are our streets? Who is responsible? Could it happen again tonight? Back at the station, the incident room comes alive. A large map of the area is pinned to the wall, red string beginning to form a web across streets and landmarks. Detectives crowd around the photos of the alley, their eyes scanning every shadow, every stray mark of graffiti, every discarded bottle and can. Witness lists grow longer by the hour. Someone saw a man loitering near the shops. Someone heard a woman arguing with someone around midnight. Someone noticed a strange car parked with its lights off. Every detail is written down. Every detail is a possible door. When they finally knock on the door of Emily's bedsit, the landlord answers with confusion already on his face. The room is tidy, bed half made, a mug with a ring of old tea at the bottom. A calendar on the wall has a small star on yesterday's date. No explanation, no secret code, just a mark. Her mother's voice cracks when they call. Her brother drops the phone when he hears the words. Missing has become murdered in the space of a single morning. Emily Ward's photograph is on the front page the next day. The same face that had blended into crowds now stares out from a million breakfast tables. The red scarf becomes a symbol, a visual hook the public clings to. She is no longer just Emily, She is the girl in the red scarf, a cold case in the making, a ghost beginning to form. And as the city reacts, as rumors start to pulse through pubs and offices and buses, one question sinks its claws into London and refuses to let go. How does a young woman travel a few simple stops across the city and end up dead in an alley just steps from a busy main road with no one able to say how she got there, and no one able to say who exactly walked beside her in the dark? In the days that follow, London breathes differently. The city still moves, still shouts, still trades and hustles and honks its horns, but there is a hesitation now, a tiny stutter in the rhythm. The headlines will not let it go. Library girl strangled in North London. Red scarf killer on the loose. A black and white photo of Emily Ward looks out from every newsstand, pinned to notice boards and launderettes, taped to the doors of corner shops. Her eyes, frozen in that single captured moment, seem to ask the same question everyone is whispering. Why me? Why here? Why like this? In the incident room, the answer is supposed to come from hard work and evidence, not headlines and fear. But the fear seeps in anyway. It's on the faces of the officers. It's in the way they look at the map, as if the city itself is lying. Detective Inspector Howard Lang stands at the front of the room, a mug of stale coffee in his hand, eyes scanning the boards. On the left, photographs of the alley, the body, the red scarf, the brick wall stained by rain and flashbulb glare. On the right, a timetable. Last sighting at the library. Ticket used at Holloway Road at 1801. Estimated time of death between 23:30 and 010 o'clock. Nearly 6 hours missing from her story. 6 hours in a city that records everything and remembers nothing. Lang taps the face of the map with the back of his pen, a soft, rhythmic knock. Somewhere in this gap, he says to the room, is our killer. Simple sentence, impossible task. They start at the beginning. The tube. Officers are sent to Holloway Road Station to canvass staff and commuters. They pull the tapes from what few cameras exist. Blurry images recorded on looping reels of tape that have already begun to degrade. The footage shows crowds pouring in and out, lines of coats, flashes of faces smearing into streaks of gray when the train arrives. There is one frame where Emily might be visible, a small figure in a dark coat with something pale at her neck. The red scarf doesn't show in monochrome. A taller shape stands near her, indistinct, hat brim cutting off the top half of his face. The tape stutters, jumps. In the next frame, the carriage doors are closing. The shapes drift apart, then vanish. They run the tape forward, backward, forward again. No miracle appears, no clear shot, just noise. Station staff remember fragments. A ticket inspector recalls a young woman who seemed a bit distracted, but he can't swear it was her. A cleaner says she saw a man pacing the platform, smoking, staring at the timetable but never boarding any train. A busker, the guitarist in the tunnel, remembers only that the crowds were thicker than usual, and that loose change that night was not bad, really. None of them noticed a struggle. No raised voices, no one running, no one dragging anyone into the dark. If Emily was taken from the station, it was done quietly, efficiently, with the city as cover, like a hand slipping into a pocket on a packed bus. Here 1 second, gone the next. At the library, they find more to work with, but nothing that points a finger. Colleagues describe Emily as quiet, punctual, kind. No enemies, no feuds, no dramatic scenes played out between the stacks. Janet, the coworker who left early, sits in a hard plastic chair in interview room 2, fingers twisting around each other until the knuckles whiten. She said she'd lock up, Janet tells them. Like always. We said goodnight. She said she might buy something for dinner on the way home. Did she seem worried, upset, afraid? No. She seemed like someone at the end of a long shift, thinking about food and warmth and nothing more. A normal day, sliced open and examined for non-existent warning signs. Then there is the family. Emily's mother arrives at the station with her son, Daniel, in tow. The boy looks younger than 14, swallowed by a coat that isn't his, eyes raw from crying. In a private room, Lang sits opposite them, his notebook closed on the table, trying to make his voice softer than it feels. He has done death notifications before. They never get easier. Did Emily mention anyone new? He asks. Anyone bothering her, following her, arguing with her? Her mother shakes her head slowly, as if any nod might snap something inside. Emily worked. Emily read books. Emily called home. She didn't have time for enemies. Daniel, staring fixedly at a crack in the wall, finally mutters, "There was some man who kept calling the library. She said he was weird." The air changes. Lang leans in. Detail. A thread. At last. They pull phone records from the library. In the weeks leading up to the murder, one number appears over and over, always in the late afternoons, always brief calls. When traced, it leads to a payphone near Finsbury Park. No name, no address, just a metal box bolted to the pavement, swallowing coins and secrets in equal measure. Witnesses remember nobody. Faces blur. A man on a phone could be anyone, and in London, anyone is the most dangerous person there is. Forensics dust the receiver, the coin slot, the metal casing, smears of prints, layers upon layers of hands. Useless. Back in the alley, the science speaks a language slower than headlines. The pathologist's report confirms what they already suspected: ligature strangulation. The scarf was pulled from behind, brutal and precise. No defensive wounds suggesting she saw it coming. No alcohol or drugs in her system. No obvious signs she had been held elsewhere for long. A faint trace of engine oil on the hem of her coat suggests she may have been in or near a vehicle shortly before death. Tire tracks at the edge of the alley are photographed, measured, compared to endless reference books. Not distinctive enough, not unique, just two more dark arcs in wet grit. The details build a picture that doesn't quite come into focus. Emily leaves the library. Emily enters the station. Somewhere between tube and alley, a 6-hour void opens. Did she meet someone she knew? Did she accept a lift from a stranger? Did she walk willingly into the dark, or was she forced? The city could answer. But the city isn't talking. Still, the public cares. For now, a tip line is opened. Phones ring constantly. People report ex-boyfriends, strange neighbors, men who stare too long at bus stops. One woman insists she saw the killer's eyes as she walked past the alley the night before. They were yellow and inhuman, she says, like a cat. Another swears she heard a high, unnatural laugh at midnight near the shops. Half of what comes in is fear dressed up as memory, imagination clinging to a story that scares it. The other half might hide the truth. The trouble is, there's no way to tell which is which. One call stands out. A shop assistant from a late-night off license 2 streets from the alley reports a man who came in around 11:30 p.m. on the night of the murder. Early 40s, brown overcoat, hat, hands shaking. He bought a bottle of cheap whiskey, paid in cash, and left without waiting for his change. He had something dark on his cuff, the assistant says. Could have been oil. Could have been blood. I didn't think about it until I saw the paper the next morning. A sketch artist works with the assistant. A composite image emerges. Narrow eyes, angular jaw, thin lips pressed too tightly together. It is printed, posted, broadcast. The tabloids give him a name before the police do. The man in the brown coat, the first ghost suspect, the city's new monster. Leads pour in. So do confessions. Men claiming responsibility for attention, for notoriety, for reasons even they can't articulate. Each confession is tested, picked apart, weighed against the facts. One by one they crumble. One by one, they are exposed as lies, fantasies, attempts to step into a story that doesn't belong to them. Lang starts sleeping badly. When he does sleep, he dreams of red wool and a stopped watch and a faceless crowd on a tube platform. Time, frozen at 6:13 on a dead girl's wrist, refuses to move forward in his head. Rumors wrap themselves around the gaps. People say Emily had a secret lover. People say she stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to see at the library. People say she was targeted by a serial killer who has struck before and will strike again. None of it is proven. All of it feels possible. The press fans the flames with speculative headlines. Is there a North London strangler? Another unsolved murder in the making? Fear sells. Fear spreads. Fear, once unleashed, is harder to control than any killer. Detectives dig into Emily's past, searching for buried volatility. They find a short-lived boyfriend from a year earlier, a sound engineer working nights in a Soho club. His name is Mark Cullen. He is angry when they turn up at his flat, not at being suspected, but at having to relive losing her. He has an alibi. Colleagues confirm he was at the club all night dealing with a blown speaker and a drunken band. CCTV from a cash machine near the club shows him withdrawing money at 12:15 a.m., miles from the alley. He is ruled out. The file grows thicker anyway. Pages upon pages of people who might have done it stacked neatly in a folder, labeled with the name of the one person who definitely didn't. As weeks turn into a month, the heat begins to bleed from the investigation. Not inside Lang's head, not in Emily's home, not in the narrow alley where a small shrine of flowers and candles continues to appear. But in the wider world, the cameras shift. Another story breaks, another tragedy, another scandal. Headlines move on. What was once breaking news becomes background mystery. A cold breeze starts to blow across the case, faint at first, almost imperceptible. the kind of chill that creeps over unsolved files when time starts to win. Yet, in a small evidence bag in a locked cabinet, there is something that doesn't fit. A single fiber found, caught in the stitching of the red scarf. Not wool, not cotton. Synthetic, pale, almost translucent. The lab notes say it could be from the interior lining of a car seat, maybe from a work overall, maybe from something else entirely. Insignificant in 1985. Unremarkable. A whisper at the bottom of a stack of shouts. It is logged, sealed, forgotten, but it is there, a strange little thread waiting, silently, for a world that knows how to listen to it properly, a future where science sharpens its teeth, a future where cold cases are not as cold as they look. Years go by in police work in two ways. Some days are a blur of calls, statements, paperwork, problems that explode and are resolved before the sun goes down. Other days stretch out like an endless corridor, every door you open leading to the same dead end. The murder of Emily Ward becomes both. At first, it's everything. It's the urgent meeting at 7 a.m., the press conference at noon, the late-night trawl through statements under fluorescent lights. Then slowly, stealthily, it becomes the case that sits on the far desk, then on the middle shelf, then in the quiet cabinet at the back of the room, still there, still heavy, but not the one anyone wants to touch when there's something easier, cleaner, newer to solve. The city doesn't care about the rhythm of the investigation, it just keeps moving. Winter of 1985 bleeds into the gray slush of early 86. Christmas lights go up and come down. New posters cover old ones. New scandals shove old headlines into the recycling bin. Library girl murder shrinks to a paragraph, then to a line, then disappears from the front pages altogether. The cameras leave, the microphones move on, but not everyone can. At a secondary school in North London, a 14-year-old boy sits at the back of a classroom staring at a textbook he's not really seeing. The teacher's voice rolls over him, a distant hum, words about history or geography or something else that doesn't matter. On the desk in front of him, hidden inside his exercise book, is a folded newspaper clipping, a grainy photograph of a young woman with a hesitant smile, dark hair framing her face, a red scarf looped around her neck. The headline above it is months old. Library assistant strangled in North London alley, police appeal for information. He has read it so many times that the paper is wearing thin at the creases. He doesn't need the words anymore. He knows them by heart. What he can't get used to is the feeling in his chest when he looks at her face, the way his stomach tightens, the way his throat burns, the way his hands start to shake. Emily Ward, his sister. The girl in the red scarf. Someone in the row ahead whispers something, someone snickers. The word murder is hissed like a joke. Teenagers are cruel in ways they don't even understand. Daniel pretends he doesn't hear. He presses the clipping flatter against the desk as if he can press the noise out of the world with it. Cold case, one of them says, testing the phrase like a new swear word. Bet they never catch him. The teacher snaps at them to be quiet, but it's too late. The phrase lands, buries, sticks. At home, the atmosphere has changed permanently. His mother moves through the house like someone underwater, everything slowed, everything muffled. Curtains are drawn more often now. The television flickers without sound. The kettle boils again and again. Half-made cups of tea appear and cool on surfaces all over the kitchen. There is a police family liaison officer who visits less and less frequently, bringing fewer and fewer updates. We're doing everything we can, they say. The investigation is ongoing. Words that sound important at first, then thin out with repetition, becoming just sounds that mean nothing new. Daniel listens from the doorway when they talk to his mother. He watches the way her shoulders tense at every knock. Sometimes, late at night, she will open the front door and stand on the step, looking out into the street, as if expecting Emily to walk up the path and say there's been a terrible mistake. Sometimes, she will call Daniel by the wrong name and then catch herself, eyes filling with apology and panic. Grief rearranges the house without asking permission. In the incident room, grief looks different. It looks like red string and pinboards and coffee stains on case files. It looks like Detective Inspector Howard Lang staring at the same photographs so long that they blur into abstraction. The alley, the body, the scarf, the watch, the ticket stub, the map with its lines and circles and arrows. He is not a man given to superstition, but this case sits on him like a curse. He hears her name in the hiss of the kettle, sees the shape of her body in the way shadows fall across an empty street. It is getting under his skin, and everyone can see it. His superiors start asking different questions, less about new leads, more about cost, manpower, priorities. You've got 3 other murders on your desk, Howard, one of them reminds him. We can't sink the whole division into one case forever. The public forgets. They move on. Lang doesn't say what he's thinking. The public might, but he doesn't. Emily's mother doesn't. Daniel doesn't. Somewhere out there, the man who wrapped that scarf around her throat definitely hasn't. Pressure does strange things to an investigation. It sharpens focus, it also warps it. The composite sketch of the man in the brown coat is still on the board, those narrow eyes staring out at the room. Officers are sent knocking on doors, checking records, leaning on informants. A name starts coming up more than once. A part-time mechanic with a record for assault. A man who lives alone, drinks hard, owns an old brown overcoat. His name is Peter Marsh. Marsh is picked up on a Friday night, dragged from a bar where he is halfway through his third pint. In the interview room, he smells of stale beer and sweat and something sour underneath. He denies everything. He has never heard of Emily Ward. He has never been near that alley. He has never called a library in his life. They push. He pushes back. They bring out the composite. He scoffs, then goes quiet. The sketch does look a little like him, but so do 100 other men in this part of London. Then they find the coat, hanging on the back of his flat door, crumpled, stinking of cigarettes and wet dogs. There's a faint dark stain on one cuff. Under the bright light of the evidence room, it looks promising. Forensics swab it, bag it, mark it. Days later, the report comes back. The stain is old engine oil, nothing more. No blood, no fibers matching the scarf. Marsh is a violent drunk with a bad attitude, but the facts won't bend enough to make him a killer. There is no link to the payphone, no matching tire tracks. His alibi for the night of the murder is messy but workable. A pub crawl with a revolving cast of witnesses who mostly remember him being loud and annoying until closing time. Still, the pressure is there. He fits, someone says in the briefing room. He's the type. As if type is enough, as if narrative should come first and evidence later. Lang watches the room tilt toward the easy answer and feels something cold settle in his stomach. He is tired. He wants this finished. He wants to go to Emily's mother and say, "We got him." But he also knows that if they build a case on sand and it collapses, the real killer walks through the cracks, laughing. The Crown Prosecution Service reviews the file. They see the sketch, the bar fights, the temper, the coat. They also see the gaps. No forensic link, no direct witness placing Marsh with Emily, no confession. They decline to charge. Marsh is released, spitting threats over his shoulder about suing the Met for harassment. The tabloids have already rushed to print with "suspect quizzed in red scarf killing." When he walks free, they don't shout as loudly about that part. For the public, the story is now muddy. Did they have him and let him go? Callers ask on talk radio. Is the killer still out there? Inside the station, morale dips. Cold case, someone mutters near the coffee machine, not quite under their breath. Lang hears it. He doesn't argue, not out loud. Instead, he walks back to the evidence room, unlocks the cabinet, and stares at the neat boxes stacked inside. Each one is a story that refused to end on time. Each one is a weight. The one labeled Ward, Emily feels heavier than the rest. He opens it. Photographs. Statements. The watch. The red scarf sealed in plastic, still twisted, still cruel. And in one small bag, almost lost among the others, the synthetic fiber, pale, fragile, ordinary. He holds the bag up to the fluorescent light. It tells him nothing, just a tiny ghost of contact with something or someone unseen. Outside of police walls, the story keeps living in quieter ways. Once a year, on the anniversary of Emily's death, a handful of people gather near the mouth of the alley. Her mother, older now, lines etched deeper into her face. Daniel, growing taller, his shoulders squarer, his jaw harder, eyes darker. A couple of former colleagues from the library, a vicar from a nearby church. They light small candles, lay fresh flowers, stand in silence while the traffic rumbles past just yards away. The first year, a local reporter shows up and writes a short piece. Family marks anniversary of unsolved murder. The second year, no one from the press comes. The third year, the florist recognizes them without needing to ask what the flowers are for. Daniel changes. At school, he stops talking about football, music, the future. He starts talking about forensic science, about fingerprints, about how killers make mistakes. He cuts out not only the articles about his sister, but any story about unsolved crimes, about breakthroughs in investigations, about justice finally served after 20 years. His bedroom walls slowly fill with clippings. He tells himself it's about understanding, about making sense of something senseless. Deep down, it's also about control. If he can learn how investigations work, maybe the one that failed her won't feel like such a blind, cruel accident. He keeps in sporadic contact with Lang. At first, it's because the liaison officer sets it up. Later, it's because he insists. As a teenager, he calls the station and asks for updates, his voice steady in a way that unnerves the officers who answer. As a young man, he comes in person sometimes, sitting opposite Lang in the same bare interview rooms where suspects sit. "Have you checked this?" he asks. "What about that?" He's not accusing, not exactly, but his question's cut. Lang answers honestly, "Yes, we chased that." "No, it went nowhere." We thought we had something there, but it fell apart. Science is limited, resources are limited, memory is limited. London in the late 80s and early 90s is not a kind place for unsolved murders. There are too many new ones. The city is changing. New buildings, new clubs, new drugs, new crimes. The word serial killer begins to appear in tabloids more often, attached to other cases, other victims. Whenever a woman is attacked in North London, there's a flicker of connection made in the papers. Is this the same man? Is this the red scarf killer again? Most of the time, the answer is no. Different methods, different motives. Still, the legend grows. A shadow figure built from half-truths and speculation. A bogeyman parents invoke to scare their daughters into coming home on time. Inside the Metropolitan Police, the file on Emily Ward quietly acquires a new sticker. Unsolved. Some people call it open pending further information. Some call it inactive. The word the public uses is simpler. Cold case, the kind of case that crime documentaries love, the kind that armchair detectives chew over for years. But in the mid-1990s, no documentary cameras come. There is no podcast, no Reddit thread, no viral hashtag. There is just a box in a room and a handful of people who still care enough to open it. Lang ages. The lines around his eyes deepen. New detectives come in, young and sharp and hungry, glancing at the cold case cabinet with the casual arrogance of people who think they'll never fail like that. He doesn't blame them. Once, he was them. Before Emily. Before nights staring at the ceiling, replaying tube station footage in his head until the shapes lose their edges. Before the quiet understanding that some stories don't get endings when you want them to. Eventually, he retires. There is a small party in a station canteen, plastic cups, a supermarket cake, a framed photograph of the early days when his hair was darker and his suit fit better. They give speeches, tell jokes about the cases he cracked, the criminals he put away, the close calls he survived. No one mentions the ones that got away. On his last day, when his desk is cleared and his locker is empty, Lang takes one final walk down the corridor to the evidence room. He stands in front of the cold case cabinet, his hand resting for a moment on the box labeled Ward, Emily. He doesn't open it. He just says her name under his breath and leaves. The box does not leave. It stays. Dust settles on its edges. It is moved from one shelf to another when the room is reorganized. An inventory is done 1 year, then another, and each time someone notes that all contents are intact. Photos, scarf, watch, fiber, statements, tape reels. A list of items in search of a story with an ending. The city outside changes again. New governments, new fashions, new technology, new fears. Inside that cabinet, time is frozen, but time is not the only force at work. While Emily's case sleeps, science does not. The world of forensics is shifting quietly in laboratories and conference rooms far from North London alleys. DNA analysis, still in its infancy when she died, is learning to read what used to be invisible. Fibers, once simple textures under a microscope, are becoming detailed signatures of manufacturing, brand, even batch. Old evidence is starting to look less like dead weight and more like a second chance. And somewhere, in a sealed plastic bag at the bottom of a box marked with her name, that strange synthetic fiber waits, pale, ordinary, easy to miss, easy to... The kind of thing a detective in 1985 might note, then move on from. The kind of thing a detective decades later might see as something else entirely. Not noise, but signal. Not a dead end, but a thread. A thin, almost invisible line that, if pulled hard enough, might lead all the way from a dark alley behind Seven Sisters Road to a living, breathing man who has been walking free under London's changing skies for far too long. Cold cases do not wake up with a dramatic chord and a flash of lightning. They stir quietly, at the edge of someone's patience, at the corner of someone else's curiosity. Decades later, the London of CCTV and smartphones barely resembles the city where Emily Ward stepped onto that tube platform. The buses look newer, the skyline is sharper, everything is faster, louder, more recorded. But the same currents of fear and chance still run underneath. People still disappear, people still die in alleys, files still end up in cabinets. The difference now is that some of those old cabinets are suddenly interesting again. The word review starts appearing in internal memos, historic investigations, legacy homicides, cold cases, getting a second look under a harsher, brighter light. In a new glass and brick police building far from the drafty corridors where Lang once walked, a detective flips through a stack of thick files, each one with dates that belong to another era. Detective Sergeant Amelia Hayes is in her 30s. Sharp-eyed, sharp-minded, with the tired expression of someone who knows that historic does not mean simple. She didn't grow up with 3 TV channels and no internet. She grew up in a world that taught her to distrust dark car parks and to never walk home with both headphones in. The stories in these boxes are the reasons why. She picks up one file, almost at random. The cardboard is worn at the edges, the label yellowing but legible. Ward, Emily, 1985, homicide. Something about the simplicity of it catches her. No subheading, no extra notes, just a name and a year. She opens it. A young woman's face looks up at her from a black and white photograph. The red scarf doesn't show, but she knows it's there. She's seen this story before, in old tabloid scans, in late-night reruns of cheap true crime shows. The girl in the red scarf, a nickname built on tragedy, a myth laid over a real girl. Hayes starts reading. The alley. The watch stopped at 6:13. The ticket from Holloway Road. The payphone at Finsbury Park. The man in the brown coat sketch. Peter Marsh, the almost suspect who slipped through their fingers or never belonged in them at all. The failed pressure to charge. The lab results limited by the technology of the time. The synthetic fiber. One short line in an evidence list that makes her pause. Unknown synthetic fiber. Pale. Possible car interior or workwear origin retained. That's it. No follow-up, no conclusion, like a sentence cut off mid-word. She leans back in her chair and stares at the ceiling for a moment. There are hundreds of old murders in London, each one with someone still hurting at the other end of it. You cannot chase them all with the same intensity. But sometimes a detail reaches out of a file and hooks you. That small, pale fiber feels like a hand tugging at her sleeve. She flips to the last pages. A retirement note from Lang. A summary of lines of inquiry exhausted. Recommend retention of all exhibits for potential future forensic advances. A man from another generation, writing to someone like her without knowing her name yet. She closes the file, stands, and walks down to the modern evidence store. It is not dusty, not dim. It is bright, controlled, temperature regulated, each shelf logged on a computer, each box tagged with barcodes. Past meets present in cardboard and plastic. She follows the catalog entry for Ward, Emily, to a specific aisle, a specific shelf. There it is. The box is the same one Lang once touched, but now it sits under LED lighting, humming softly. She lifts it down carefully, as if it might break the moment she breathes too hard. Inside, the contents are familiar from the file, but different in person. Photographs locked in plastic sleeves, the watch, its cracked face still frozen, as if refusing to admit that time moved on without her. The red scarf, preserved in clear wrapping, its weave visible in painful detail, the twist still there, captured forever in the position someone forced it into around her throat. Hayes feels the back of her neck prickle. Objects hold weight, that paper doesn't. This is not just a story now, it's a gravity well. She finds the small evidence bag nearly lost under the larger ones. Item 23, synthetic fiber. It is as unimpressive as any clue has ever looked. A thread, barely visible, pale and thin, clinging to the inside of clear plastic. But she knows the rules of this new era. It's the tiny things that talk the loudest now. Touch DNA, microscopic fibers, trace residues, evidence that would have been background noise in 1985 can now sing under the right machine. She logs the chain of custody, signs the digital forms, and authorizes submission for contemporary analysis. The lab is no longer across the courtyard. It's a specialized unit with new machines and new minds. When she fills out the reason for submission box on the form, she doesn't write much. Cold case review, possible car seat or workwear fiber, requests full comparison with current and legacy databases. Underneath, she adds one more line. This one bothers me. It's not required, it's not procedural, it's just honest. The evidence bag leaves her hands and enters a different world. Centrifuges, microscopes, comparison charts, algorithms spinning through vast catalogs of known materials. Metal drawers slide open and closed. Technicians in lab coats talk in measured tones over whirring machines. Among them is a man in his late 30s with dark hair beginning to thin at the temples, his eyes ringed with the kind of permanent tiredness that doesn't come only from night shifts. His ID badge reads, D. Ward, Forensic Analyst. Daniel. He did not join the police. He couldn't bear the thought of wearing the same uniform that knocked on his mother's door. Instead, he came in sideways through science. Years of study, years of exams, years of staring at the tiny things that other people overlook. Fibers, hairs, skin cells, the invisible fingerprints reality leaves on itself. He tells colleagues that he chose this path because it's fascinating, because it's where the real answers are. He does not always add, because no one found enough answers for her. He sees the bag come through like any other. Barcodes, case number, date. He reads the label once, twice, then a third time because his brain refuses to accept what his eyes just told it. Ward, Emily, 1985. Location code 7 Sisters, Ard, Rear Service Alley. His throat tightens, his hands go cold. For a second, the lab around him fades. He is 13 again, standing at the back of a small group on an anniversary, candles flickering, police tape residue still clinging to the alley wall. He hears his mother quietly sobbing beside him. He hears a detective, not Lang, a younger one sent in his place, promising they are still doing everything they can. He remembers knowing even then that they weren't, not anymore. Now here it is, a fiber he's never been told about, bagged and tagged before he was old enough to understand what any of it meant. He could tell someone, he could hand it off, he could say there's a conflict, that he can't be objective, that this is too close. The handbook would probably recommend exactly that, but there is a part of him that has been waiting for this moment so long it feels like a second skeleton inside his chest, made of questions and sleepless nights. He doesn't step back, he steps closer, carefully, deliberately. He checks the logs to see who ordered the test, D.S. Amelia Hayes. He doesn't know her yet, but in that moment he feels something like gratitude for a stranger. Someone opened the box, someone looked twice, someone listened to the little line on the evidence list that everyone else skimmed over. That matters. That is huge. That is dangerous. Hope can be a sharper blade than grief. He does everything by the book. No shortcuts, no desperate rush. He prepares the sample, splits it, registers every stage, double-checks every entry, making sure that if anyone ever audits this, they won't find a single crack to wedge doubt into. Then he puts the fiber under the microscope. Magnification turns the thread into a landscape, spun filaments, slight irregularities, a faint sheen that shifts depending on the angle of the light. He takes photographs, runs measurements, then he starts the comparisons. Modern databases hold vast libraries of known materials. Automotive seat fabrics by model and year, industrial workwear by manufacturer, upholstery batches, carpet types, composite blends, every shade, every weave, every chemical composition stamped and filed from crime scenes and control samples across the country. What once would have been a guess, probably a car seat, can now sometimes be translated into front passenger seat of this specific model, made between these specific months, using this specific fabric from this specific supplier. If the fiber wants to talk, the system will coax it. The results do not come instantly. Machines run, software compares. The lab lights hum through another evening. Outside, London's sky bleeds from gray to black, streetlights flickering on one by one, cars hissing past on wet roads. Daniel sits at his workstation, pretending to focus on other cases. A burglary here, a hit and run there, but his eyes keep drifting back to the status window on his screen. Analysis in progress, a liar's phrase. It might as well say, your life is on hold. At last, a notification pings. He clicks it fast enough to hurt his wrist. The interface fills with charts and values, and most importantly, a ranked list of potential matches. Not broad categories, not vague guesses, specifics, brand, type, year. Some lines are grayed out immediately. Incomplete data, sample contamination, probabilities too low. One line is not gray, one line is highlighted. Polyester nylon blend, interior seat fiber, commercial vehicle, not personal car, model, cargo van, manufacturer, British firm long gone, swallowed by mergers. Upholstery batch used predominantly in fleet vans supplied to service companies, utilities, maintenance, deliveries during the early to mid-1980s. The system estimates a strong likelihood that the fiber came from a passenger seat or driver's seat of that specific van type, not from overalls, not from a sofa. From a mobile, box-shaped piece of anonymity that could pull into an alley, block a view, open a door, swallow someone whole, and disappear again into traffic without anyone thinking twice. A van. The word lands in Daniel's chest with a thud. He thinks back to witness statements he once read late at night when he shouldn't have had access. Someone mentioned a strange van parked with its lights off near the shops that night. It was dismissed at the time, too common, too vague, too unremarkable. He scrolls through the metadata. One more detail jumps out. The database cross-references not just material and manufacturer, but known purchasers. Back then, there were fewer fleet buyers, fewer companies ordering that specific configuration. A short list appears. 5 names. 5 companies that, on paper, once drove around London in vans lined with this exact fiber. His heart is pounding so hard he can hear it. One of the company names is long gone, dissolved. Another moved operations abroad. Another is a delivery service whose vans are unrecognizable now, modern, redesigned, cleaned of their past. But the last 2, one is a utilities subcontractor that rebranded but never fully vanished. Skeletons absorbed into newer structures. Offices changed, logos changed, but some of the old records are still accessible. Vehicle logs, driver rosters, maintenance schedules, names. Daniel sits very still. For the first time in his life, the case that took his sister is not just a static wall he's throwing himself against. It has a crack in it. A thin line of light leaking through a van, a company, a list of drivers who once took that van down roads all over North London, passing tube stations, passing alleys, passing girls in red scarves. He takes a breath, then another. He saves the report, he flags it, he follows every internal protocol he knows by heart. Then he picks up the phone and dials the extension listed on the submission form. D.S. Amelia Hayes answers on the second ring, her voice short, mid-task. Hayes. Detective Sergeant, he says, keeping his tone as level as he can. This is Daniel Ward in forensics. You submitted a fiber from a cold case. Reference, Ward, Emily, 1985. There's a pause on the line, a recognition of the name, the hint of a question she doesn't quite ask. Yes, she says. What have you got? He looks at the screen again, at the highlighted line, at the list of 5 fleet owners, at the little blinking cursor waiting for whatever comes next. He feels the weight of decades sit up straight and lean in. I think, he says slowly, clearly each word a step onto a very narrow, very high bridge, we might have just found the vehicle he used. The silence on the line stretches a fraction too long. In that thin crack of time, you can almost hear decades shifting, dust lifting off old boxes, ghosts turning their heads. Then Hayes exhales a short, precise breath that sounds almost like a curse. Say that again, she tells him, voice low, suddenly very awake. We have a strong match, Daniel repeats, keeping his tone controlled, pinning each word down like evidence. The fiber is consistent with interior seat material from a commercial cargo van, early to mid-80s. Very specific make, very specific batch. The database cross-referenced known buyers. We've got a short list of companies that would have operated vans with this upholstery in London at the time. And you're confident? She asks. Not because she doubts him, but because every cold case detective learns the same lesson. Hope is a dangerous contaminant. As confident as the tech allows, he says. It's not a guess. It's not probably. It's a high likelihood match. Your victim was in one of those vans, detective, at some point, before she died. For a moment, neither of them speaks. Hayes stares at the pinboard in front of her, the old black and white scene photos, the map of North London, the faded sketch of the man in the brown coat. She sees the alley differently now, not as an isolated stage, but as the end of a route, a drop-off point. You don't walk someone into that space from the main road without witnesses. But you can drive them there. You can pull up, block the view, slide open a door, in, out, gone. A van turns a random alley into a private room with brick walls. Send me everything, she says. Full report, raw data, company list. It's already in your inbox, Daniel replies. Of course it is. He pressed send before he picked up the phone. There is a scraping sound on his end, a chair moving. Detective, I should probably disclose something. She glances at the file on her desk, the name on the tab, the name in her ear. It clicks. You're related, she says quietly. Not a question. Yes. There's no hesitation. She was my sister. The words hang there, heavy, undeniable. Hayes closes her eyes briefly. There are protocols about this, conflict of interest, emotional involvement. But there is also reality. The fiber would have been tested by somebody. It just happened to land on the desk of a boy who grew up in the shadow of this case and decided to spend his life learning the language of tiny, stubborn truths. Fate. Coincidence. Call it whatever you want. It's here now. Understood, she says. From this point on, anything you do on this case is by the book. No shortcuts, no quiet favors, every step logged, every test double-checked. You good with that? Yes, he says. I wouldn't have it any other way. She believes him, not because she's sentimental, but because she recognizes the tone. People who have lived with a case this long don't want shortcuts. They've seen where shortcuts lead. They want the kind of slow, brutal certainty that will survive cross-examination, appeals, news cycles, and time itself. When she hangs up, the incident room feels different. Not louder, just sharper. The air seems to hum. She prints the report, the list of companies, the breakdown of the fiber's composition. 5 corporate names stare back at her from the page, relics from another era. Logos that once appeared on the sides of white vans idling in London traffic. Now, some of them only exist as lines in old registries, half-forgotten entries in government archives. She starts making calls, not to witnesses, not yet, to records, to archives. To the quiet places where paper goes to sleep when no one has asked it anything in a long time. Vehicle registrations, fleet contracts, employment rosters. She works with a civilian analyst who lives for this kind of detective work at a computer screen, tracing corporate histories, mapping mergers, pulling threads through databases that were never designed to talk to each other. Hour by hour, a picture forms. One of the companies folded in 1989, its assets sold at auction, vans dispersed, records destroyed in a warehouse fire, dead end. Another shifted operations to the Midlands, their London fleet decommissioned long ago. Their HR logs are incomplete. The few names they can recover belong to men who died, moved abroad, or have no obvious link to Emily's world. A third operated mostly in South London at the time, their routes miles from Holloway Road and Seven Sisters Road, their vans seen and ticketed in completely different postcodes. Possible, but unlikely, that leaves two. The first is a delivery company servicing small shops, newspapers, magazines, cigarettes. Their vans were everywhere all the time. The second is a utilities subcontractor handling minor repairs, electrical faults, meter checks, emergency call-outs in North London postcodes. Their vans moved through the city like blood cells through veins, slipping into side streets, stopping briefly, then moving on. Both kept better records than anyone has a right to expect from the mid-'80s. Hayes orders full pulls, old microfiche, boxed ledgers, scanned sheets from basements that smell of damp and toner. She spreads lists of registration plates across the table, matching them against any historical sightings near the crime scene on the night Emily died. It's a long shot. Parking tickets, traffic citations, witness statements that mention a white van. Then something small but solid lands, a parking enforcement log from November 1985. A white utilities van, license plate LHK4YF, recorded on Seven Sisters Road at 2247, less than a mile from the alley where Emily's body was found, less than 90 minutes before the earliest estimated time of death. The vehicle was noted for short-term obstruction but not ticketed, minor, forgettable, but it's there. And when they cross-reference the plate with company records, a name appears. Driver, Graham Holt, employed from 1983 to 1987. Routine duties. North London patch, no recorded disciplinary issues serious enough to matter at the time. Just another man in a uniform in a van doing a job no one thinks about unless the lights go out. Hayes circles the name, feels that old prickle again. This is not proof, this is not the answer. This is a line pointing in a direction. She checks his date of birth. If he's still alive, he's in his 60s now. He could be anywhere. Retired, dead, living under another name. Or sitting in a semi-detached house somewhere, mowing the lawn, watching quiz shows, convinced that the past is buried deep enough. She orders a background trace, electoral rolls, tax records, old employment histories, databases glow under her fingertips as the system hunts. And then, as if this is just another routine inquiry and not the unfreezing of a 20-something-year-old nightmare, the answer pops up on her screen. Current address, a small town on the outskirts of London just beyond the sprawl, all cul-de-sacs and quiet streets with similar front gardens. Status, retired, no recent criminal record, no flagged alerts, just a name in a list. She stares at it for a long moment. This is the point where cases like this can tilt into obsession or collapse under doubt. Plenty of innocent people drove vans with those seats. Plenty of innocent drivers were on Seven Sisters Road that night. But the fiber didn't come from nowhere. The parking log didn't invent itself. Every coincidence in this case feels less like chance and more like an old story, impatient to be finished. She calls her superintendent, runs through the development step by step, data point by data point. She hears the skepticism at first, then the slow shift as he realizes this isn't just a hunch. There is science. There are documents. There is a vehicle identified in black ink decades ago that now, finally, means something. They authorize a covert visit. No sirens, no fanfare. Just two detectives in plain clothes knocking on a door in a quiet street. She picks her partner carefully. Detective Constable Ryan Malik, sharp, calm, with a talent for reading body language. They drive out in an unmarked car on a Tuesday afternoon when the sky is low and the air has that restless feeling again, just like all those years ago. The navigation leads them through rows of nearly identical houses, all pebble-dashed fronts in anyone's garden hedges, children's bikes on driveways, satellite dishes on walls, ordinary, forgettable. Graham Holt's house is near the end of a cul-de-sac, net curtains, a small, neat lawn, a hanging basket of flowers that have seen better days. There is an old, compact car in the driveway, not a van. Times change, vehicles change, some things don't. Hayes feels the weight of Emily's file in the folder on her lap like a physical presence. She leaves it on the back seat. No need to bring a ghost to the doorstep. They ring the bell. Footsteps, slow but steady, approach from inside. The door opens. The man who looks out at them is in his early 60s, maybe, but age sits uneasily on him. His hair is thin at the crown, gray at the sides. His shoulders still have a hint of the old physical strength, but there's a sag in his posture as if he's spent years leaning over something, an engine, a toolbox, a steering wheel. His eyes are the thing that register most sharply, pale, watchful, a fraction too quick to calculate. Yes, he says. Not unfriendly, not welcoming, neutral ground. Mr. Holt, Hayes asks. Graham Holt. He hesitates just enough to notice if you're looking for it. Yes, that's me. She shows him her warrant card. Detective Sergeant Hayes, this is Detective Constable Malik. We'd like to ask you a few questions if you don't mind. His eyes flick to the cards, then to their faces, then over their shoulders, scanning the quiet street. Old instincts, maybe. Old habits. What about? He asks. Hayes doesn't answer immediately. Could we come inside? She says. It might be better to talk where it's more private. Another hesitation, barely there. His jaw moves, a tiny clench. I suppose, he says. If this is about the neighbor's tree, I've already... It's not about your neighbor, Malik cuts in gently. It's about your work in the mid-1980s, your time driving for North Line Utilities. The name lands like a small stone dropped in a still pond. Holt's eyes narrow. There is a flicker of something, recognition, irritation, fear, then it's gone. That was a long time ago, he says. I don't work anymore, retired, don't see what help I can be. Memory's a funny thing, Hayes replies. Sometimes it surprises us. If we could just have a few minutes. He steps back from the door at last. Fine, he mutters. Come in then, but I don't know what you expect me to remember from 40 years ago? The hallway smells faintly of dust and bleach. A narrow table holds a few framed photographs. A younger Holt outside a van in company overalls. Another of him at some kind of staff party holding a beer, smiling with colleagues who have probably scattered to the wind by now. No wife visible, no children. If they exist, they do not claim this hallway space. They sit in a modest lounge, floral sofa, television in the corner, curtains half drawn even though it's daytime. Hayes chooses an armchair that lets her see both Holt and the front door. Malik takes the other end of the sofa. Holt sits opposite them, hands on his knees, fingers interlaced. So, he says, with forced casualness, utilities, old work. What's this about? Hayes studies him for a second. Then she says the name plainly, watching his eyes. It's about Emily Ward. The reaction is small, but in a room this quiet, small is enough. The fingers tighten on his knees. His gaze drops, then jerks back up. His tongue flicks across his lips. Don't know who that is, he says. Too fast. Too flat. She was murdered in 1985, Hayes continues, voice steady. North London. Found in an alley off Seven Sisters Road. Maybe you remember the news. Girl in the red scarf. Something passes across his face then. Not grief, not guilt, something like annoyance. As if she has dragged an old, inconvenient memory into his neatly arranged present. Lots of bad things happened back then, he mutters. Lots of girls got themselves into trouble. Doesn't mean I had anything to do with it. Malik leans forward just a fraction. We have records showing your van on Seven Sisters Road the night she died, Mr. Holt, he says calmly. Around 11:15, you remember that? That was my patch, Holt snaps too quickly. Then catching himself, I mean, I drove all over there. Seven Sisters, Holloway, Finsbury Park. That's what the job was. Fix things, read meters, go where they sent me. If you got some ticket or whatever, it just proves I was doing my job. Hayes lets the silence stretch. She has learned that people will rush to fill it. Holt doesn't disappoint. What is this? He demands. You drag me out of my afternoon, into my own living room, and start talking about some murder from God knows when. Why now? Why me? Because a fiber clung to a scarf. Because a van's upholstery remembered what everyone else tried to forget. Because time is finally on her side. Hayes doesn't say any of that. Instead, she leans forward slightly, folding her hands. We're reviewing a number of unsolved homicides, she says. New forensic techniques, old evidence. Sometimes things that didn't mean much back then mean something now. In this case, we've identified a specific type of van used around the time and location of the murder. Your employer owned several. You drove one of them. You were logged on that road. That's why we're here. Holt's jaw works again. He looks older now than when he opened the door. Not because of the years on his face, but because of something in his eyes. A flicker of calculation giving way to something darker. You can dig up whatever you like, he mutters. I didn't kill anyone. I was just doing my job. You think you can come in here, wave some old paper around, and pin some girl's death on me after all this time? Hayes holds his gaze. We're not pinning anything on anyone, she says. We're asking questions. You were in the area that night. You had a van that could have been used. So I'm going to ask you this once, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Did you, at any point, have a young woman in your van that evening who did not work for your company and was not a customer you were authorized to transport? The room goes very still. Outside, a car passes, distant and muffled. Somewhere, a dog barks. Holt opens his mouth, closes it. His fingers twitch on his knees. He looks at the television, blank and dark. Then slowly, he lifts his eyes back to hers. No, he says. One word, clean, sharp, practiced. Hayes nods once, as if she expected nothing else. She stands, smoothing her jacket. Malik follows. Thank you for your time, Mr. Holt, she says. We may need to speak to you again. We'll be in touch. He looks surprised. That's it? For today, she replies. Don't leave town without telling us. And if you remember anything, even something that feels small or unimportant, this is my card. She places it on the coffee table. He doesn't pick it up. They walk back down the hallway, past the old photograph of a young man in overalls grinning beside a white van. Outside, the air feels colder. The sky is darker than it should be. In the car, Malik exhales. He's lying, he says quietly. Of course he is, Hayes answers. She starts the engine, eyes still on the rearview mirror. In the reflection, she can see Holt's front window curtain shift just slightly, as if someone is watching them leave. Think it's him? Malik asks. Hayes pulls away from the curb. I think, she says, that we just knocked on the door of a man who has spent a long time rehearsing how to say no. Behind them, on a quiet cul-de-sac in the outskirts of London, a retired utilities driver stands alone in his lounge, staring at the business card on his coffee table. In his mind, an alley that he hasn't allowed himself to think about for years flickers back into focus. Brick walls, wet tarmac, the weight of something limp in his hands, the soft drag of a scarf sliding over skin. He closes his eyes. For the first time in a long time, the past is not staying where he left it. The drive back to the station is quiet, but it isn't calm. The kind of silence that fills the car is loaded, charged, humming with unsaid calculations. Hayes keeps her eyes on the road, but her mind is still in that cramped lounge, watching a retired utilities driver pretend he's never heard of a woman whose face once stared from every newsstand. Malik scrolls back through his mental recording of the interview, hitting replay on every micro-expression, every twitch, every pause. There is no one moment where Holt stands up and shouts, "I did it." There almost never is. But guilt leaves fingerprints in other places. Back in the incident room, the light feels harsher, the boards more accusing. Hayes sits at her desk and begins to write. Not a dramatic confession, not a victory report, just facts. Holt's employment, the van, the parking log, his location on Seven Sisters Road, his denial, his body language, their impressions, carefully labeled as impressions, so no one can accuse them of stacking the deck. She attaches the fiber report from forensics, the vehicle match, the list of companies whittled down until his name sits almost alone at the end of the thread. Her superintendent reads in silence, eyes moving quickly, but not carelessly. When he reaches the last page, he taps the corner of the file against the table. You still don't have him in the alley, he says. Not yet. You've got him in the area. You've got him in the van. You've got him fidgeting on his own sofa. It's not enough to kick his door in and tear the place apart. I know, Hayes replies, but we're closer than anyone's been in 30 years. He leans back, rubs the bridge of his nose. You want a search warrant, he says flatly. Yes, she answers. No hesitation. House, any storage units, any old work kits he might have kept. Tools, uniforms, diaries, photographs, souvenirs, if he kept them. Men like this don't always throw everything away. Sometimes they hold on to something small, a scrap, a token. And if he doesn't, the superintendent asks, if we raid an old man's house and find nothing but gardening tools and TV guides, then we're where we've been for 3 decades, she says quietly. But at least we'll know we looked properly, with the tools we have now, not the ones they had then. He studies her for a long moment, then he nods once. Build me the application, he says. Make it airtight, and while you're doing that, dig deeper. I want more than a parking log and a fiber before we stick our heads above the parapet. See if his name floats near any other nastiness from that time. If he's our man, Emily Ward won't be his only shadow. It's not an order she needs to hear twice. While she goes hunting through old systems, another man walks the sterile corridors of the forensic unit, the echo of his own footsteps reminding him how alone he's been with this for so long. Daniel finishes logging the fiber report and sends a clean copy through official channels. Watching it scan, attach, and vanish into the network feels like letting go of something he's been clutching tight inside his chest. For the first time, the case is not just a weight he drags around, it's a live wire he's holding with other people. He doesn't tell anyone else in the lab that this is his sister. They don't need to know to do their jobs. All they need is the case number and the samples. The red scarf, still sealed, still twisted, waits in a controlled temperature drawer, tagged and cataloged. It was examined in the 80s, touched, photographed, handled with what passed for care back then, but care and contamination were different concepts 30 years ago. Trace evidence that would now be protected like gold dust was once brushed aside as insignificant, unnoticed skin cells smeared into oblivion. Now those cells might be the loudest voices in the room. Daniel requests permission for modern DNA processing on the scarf and other exhibits. The original tests were blood type level at best, cruder, broader, incapable of reading the tiny variations that make a profile unique. New methods can scrape microscopic traces from old fabric, coax partial profiles from places no one thought to look. It's not a guarantee. Time erodes. Heat, light, mishandling all chew away at what's left. But there is a chance. And if the fiber has given them the vehicle, then DNA might give them the man. The request is approved. It helps that cold cases make good press when they crack. It helps that someone up the chain understands what it would mean to turn a mythic girl in the red scarf into a line in a courtroom. Match probability greater than 1 in a billion. He signs everything twice because he knows someone will check and he wants them to. He watches as a colleague, not him, never him, not for this stage, carefully unwraps just enough of the scarf inside a controlled cabinet to expose sections that might not have been heavily handled. Areas near the knot. The parts that bit into her throat. If someone pulled hard from behind, skin cells might have transferred. A thumb, fingers, sweat and flakes that ordinary eyes will never see. Swabs are taken. Fibers lifted. Every action is logged, timed, witnessed. The DNA machine doesn't care that this sample is personal. It just cares about bases pairing and cycles completing. As it runs, Daniel steps away because if he stays, he will count every beep as heartbeats that stopped for Emily in that alley. He fills the weight with other work, but his mind keeps drifting back. Meanwhile, in a different part of the building, Hayes has her own machine to fight with. Not a sleek, humming sequencer, but the older, slower gears of institutional memory. She feeds names and dates into systems designed for tax, health, housing, crime, trying to see where Graham Holt has brushed against anything that might smell like this case. She widens the search, not just him, his employer, his routes, other unsolved attacks within his radius. It's like dragging a net through murky water. You pull up shopping trolleys, tires, weeds, false positives, but every so often, something glints. An attempted abduction near Finsbury Park. A 20-year-old student walking home from a late shift at a cafe reported being followed by a white van. The van pulled close to the curb. The driver leaned out, shouted that she'd dropped something. When she turned, confused, the passenger door slid open and a hand shot out, grabbing for her arm. She twisted free, fell, tore her jeans, and ran. The van drove off. She gave a statement. Driver, white male, late 30s or 40s, dark hair, thin face, wearing some kind of work uniform. Van, white, maybe with a logo. Couldn't see clearly. No plates recorded, no CCTV. The report was logged, filed, left to gather dust because nothing ever came of it. No follow-up attack in that exact pattern, no escalation they could see, or maybe there was, and her name was Emily. Hayes leans closer to the screen. Finsbury Park. Near the payphone that kept calling the library, near the routes Holt drove, the attempted abduction report mentions the smell in the van. Oil, damp fabric, cigarette smoke, a detail that survived where the plate didn't. She prints the old statement, smooths it flat with her hand. She digs further back. Minor complaints. Women ringing in to say a van slowed down beside them, driver staring too long. A utilities worker making inappropriate comments during a house call. None of it enough to trigger disciplinary processes that survive the decades. A note in an old HR file surfaces. Holt moved to different route following customer complaint. No formal action taken. No details attached. No name. Just a line, a shuffle, quiet damage control. It's something. Not enough, but something. She adds it all to the warrant application. The fiber, the company list, the van records, the parking log, the HR note, the attempted abduction. A pattern emerges, faint but visible. A man in a van, working the same streets as a victim, an opportunity structure, a modus operandi trying to speak across time. The application goes upstairs. She can't make the magistrate sign it faster by staring at it, but she still stares, as if force of will could speed ink. While she waits, she asks one more question. Is the woman from the 1984 report still alive? Still in London? It takes a day to track her. She moved twice, changed jobs, changed her name when she married. But people leave traces, and this time the traces align. Hayes finds her in a small office where she now works as a school administrator, middle-aged, competent, polite. When the detective introduces herself and says the words, Finsbury Park, 1984, white van, the woman goes very still. Some memories don't fade. They just retreat to the back of the shelf and wait. They sit in a quiet meeting room with a glass wall and a view of a playground where children scream and laugh. The woman, Sarah now, not the girl she was, tells the story again. Her voice doesn't tremble, but her hands do. I told myself I overreacted, she says at one point, that I made too much of it, because nothing happened, right? I got away. I remember running so hard my lungs hurt. I remember my knees bleeding. I remember thinking, if I trip again, I'm dead. Do you remember his face? Hayes asks gently. Sarah closes her eyes. Not clearly, she says. It was dark. I remember his arm, though, the way he reached. There was grease on his sleeve, and the van, the seats, there was this rough fabric, scratched the side of my leg when he grabbed me. She touches her thigh unconsciously. I can still hear the sound the door made when it slid open. It stuck a little. Utility van, old fittings, rough fabric, not the smoother upholstery of private cars. Holt's world. Hayes shows her the composite of the man in the brown coat, and then carefully a recent photograph of Holt from his staff file. Does he look familiar? Sarah studies them both for a long time. Too long. Hope wants her to say yes. Caution insists on honesty. Maybe, she says finally. There's something about the eyes. But after all this time, I don't know. I'd hate to point a finger at the wrong man. That answer is worth more than a confident lie. It means she is not bending her memory to fit the story. It means that if later she says, that's him, it will be because something true has surfaced, not because she wants to see an ending. Hayes thanks her, leaves her with a contact card, and walks back to the car feeling both stronger and more exposed. They are stacking kindling. They still need a spark. The spark may already be running through wires in the lab. 2 days after the scarf was re-examined, a notification pings in the forensic system. DNA analysis complete. Partial profile obtained. Daniel opens it with the same mix of dread and hunger that's been riding his shoulders since the sample went in. The readout is there. Alleles marked, peaks and troughs on the graph. A pattern that is not his, not hers, not any lab contamination they recognize. It is incomplete. Age, degradation, handling have eaten away chunks. But what remains is specific enough to be compared. He runs it against the National DNA Database, a familiar process, now loaded with a different kind of weight. The system churns, searches, compares. He knows the odds. If Holt has never been arrested for a qualifying offense, his DNA might never have been taken, let alone uploaded. But maybe he slipped once, drunk and disorderly, assault, theft, something that had his cheek swabbed and barcoded. The result comes back, no direct hit, no perfect match, just a handful of low-level near misses that fall into the realm of statistical coincidence. Not enough, not yet. But the profile is real. It exists. It can be used for kinship analysis, for future comparisons, for the day when someone finally is swabbed and the system pings and says, "You've seen this pattern before in a scarf that choked the life out of a young woman behind a row of North London shops." Daniel prints the summary and sends it to Hayes. With it, he includes a line that is both professional and personal. Profile obtained. No direct match yet. Hold on to this. It will matter. By the time the report reaches her desk, a different email is already sitting in her inbox. Warrant approved. Search authorized. Address listed. Scope wide. House, outbuildings, vehicles, electronics, paper records, all green lit. She feels the shift as she reads. For years, the case has been something to circle around, careful, respectful, afraid of stepping wrong. Now, for the first time, they are allowed to walk straight in. She calls Malik, calls the search team supervisor. They gather in a briefing room. A handful of officers who weren't even born when Emily died, now preparing to comb through the life of a man who's had decades to forget her. Hayes stands at the front, Holt's photograph on the screen behind her, the old alley photo beside it. This is not a fishing expedition, she tells them. We are not out there to see what we can find in some vague way. We are looking for specific things, any remaining work materials from his time at Northline, records that place him in specific locations on relevant dates, clothing that could retain trace evidence, any item that looks like it doesn't belong, something kept, something hidden. We treat every room like a crime scene. We treat every cupboard like it's been holding its breath for 40 years. One of the younger constables raises a hand. Do we expect him to resist? Hayes thinks of the man on the sofa, fingers digging into his knees, eyes darting to the door. I expect him to act surprised, she says. I expect him to ask if we don't have anything better to do. I expect him to say we're wasting our time. And underneath that, Malik asks quietly. She looks at the photograph of the alley again, at the red scarf in the evidence bag in her mind, at the line in the lab report that says van interior fiber, high likelihood match. Underneath that, she says, I expect him to be terrified. Outside, night is settling over London again. pressing down on the streets, on the alleys, on the houses at the edge of the city. Somewhere in one of those houses, Graham Holt sits in his lounge, the television blaring nonsense, his eyes not really on it. His mind keeps drifting back to the knock on the door, the badge, the questions. He tells himself they have nothing. He tells himself he has outlived this. He doesn't hear the quiet machinery of a warrant sliding into place. He doesn't see the search team checking their flashlights, their evidence bags, their gloves. He doesn't feel the past turning in its sleep, getting ready, finally, to wake up fully. Dawn comes in thin and colorless over the cul-de-sac. The kind of pale, washed-out light that makes everything look tired. The grass, the cars, the bricks, the past. It's barely 6 a.m. when the unmarked cars roll in, quiet as a held breath. No sirens, no shouting, just doors opening, boots on tarmac, jackets zipped up against the cold. The search team moves with the calm precision of people who have done this many times before, just not always with 40 years of dead air behind the front door. They gather briefly at the corner, out of sight of the house. Hayes runs through it one more time. "Remember," she says, voice low, clipped, "this isn't a drugs raid. We're not looking for obvious. We're looking for old. Anything from his utilities days. Anything that looks like it's been kept for no good reason. If you don't understand why it's there, bag it. If you're not sure, call me." Malik checks his watch. "We good?" She nods. The warrant is in her pocket, weighty as a stone. "Let's go." They move up the street as a single controlled wave. A neighbor 2 doors down peels back a curtain. Another pretends not to notice but steps onto their porch to get some air. This is the kind of street where nothing happens. Today, something is happening. They can feel it. Hayes knocks, firm, 3 times. No answer. She knocks again, louder. "Police," she calls out. "Mr. Holt, open the door, please." For a couple of seconds, there's nothing. Then footsteps, slow, reluctant, coming down the hallway. The door opens a crack, chain still latched. A sliver of Holt's face appears, eyes bloodshot, hair flattened on one side. He looks like he hasn't slept. "What now?" he mutters. Hayes holds up the warrant, angled so he has to look at it, not at her. "Graham Holt, we have a warrant to search this address and any vehicles and outbuildings associated with it in connection with a homicide investigation." His eyes flick to the top of the page, skimming words he doesn't want to process. "This is ridiculous," he snaps. "This is harassment. I told you yesterday, You told us no," she cuts in. "We heard you. Now we're here to see if the house says the same thing." He stares at her, then at the uniformed officers standing behind. Swallows. His hand trembles on the chain. For a second, she thinks he might slam the door. Instead, his shoulders drop, a tiny collapse, and he slides the chain free. "Fine," he says. "Do what you want. You won't find anything." They step inside, the search team fanning out in controlled directions, one to the kitchen, another to the small rear garden, 2 straight upstairs. Malik stays close to Hayes, both of them watching Holt as much as the walls. "Do you live alone, Mr. Holt?" Malik asks casually. "Yeah," he mutters, "just me." "No partner, no kids? Anyone who might be upset we're here?" "Didn't see the point," he says, something bitter flickering across his face. "People leave, houses stay." Hayes files that line away. People leave. Some don't get the chance. Upstairs, drawers open, wardrobes slide. Decorations are sparse, no family photos, no souvenirs of holidays, just functional clothes, functional furniture, functional life. In the bedroom, a wardrobe holds shirts stacked too neatly, trousers hung precisely. On the top shelf, a battered cardboard box sits pushed to the back, out of easy reach. One of the constables pulls it down carefully. "Control," she calls. "I've got a box of old paperwork and something else." "Bag it and log it," comes the reply. But when she lifts the lid to verify, her breath catches. Inside, alongside yellowing letters and old payslips, are photographs, not in frames, loose, faded, some of them clearly from work. Vans, roadworks, a younger Holt squinting into the sun in overalls. Others are different. Women, photographed from a distance in streets and on pavements, unaware. Heads turned away, shoulders hunched, coats pulled tight. Street photography, someone could argue. Random. Harmless. Except there is a pattern. Most of them are taken from inside a vehicle. The angle is just off, glass reflections in the corners. And many of the women share similar features. Young, dark hair, walking alone. One image near the bottom of the stack is sharper than the rest. A woman leaving what looks like a library building, coat collar up, bag on her shoulder. The sign above the door is out of frame, but a corner of a familiar brick facade shows. The date printed in the corner in that burnt orange font of old film processing reads, OCT 85. The constable swallows hard. "D.S. Hayes," she calls. "You're going to want to see this." Downstairs in the kitchen, another officer opens a cupboard that looks like a good place to stash cleaning products. On the bottom shelf, bleach and detergent. On the top, pushed behind a stack of old newspapers, a small metal tin, the kind that once held biscuits or tea. He pulls it out. It rattles. He pops the lid carefully. Inside, in the darkness of the tin, are objects that have no reason to live together. A single earring, cheap metal, the clasp bent. A train ticket stub to a station nowhere near here. A folded scrap of red wool, frayed at the edges, the color faded but unmistakable. He stares at it, suddenly aware of his own heartbeat. "Oh, Christ," he whispers under his breath. Then louder, "Boss!" In the lounge, Hayes is watching Holt pretend to watch the TV, the sound still off. He looks small on his own sofa now, swallowed by the floral pattern. When the calls come from upstairs and the kitchen in quick succession, something in his face cracks like paint under heat. "We've located some items of interest," Malik says calmly into his radio. "Continue methodical search." Hayes turns back to Holt. "You told us we wouldn't find anything," she says softly. "You sure you want to stick with that?" He doesn't answer. His eyes are fixed on an invisible point on the carpet. Jaw clenched so tight the muscles jump. The photographs arrive first, carefully brought down in gloved hands, laid out on the coffee table one by one inside clear sleeves. Hayes looks at them, each one a slice of someone's privacy stolen from behind a windscreen. Her eyes skim the September dates, the August ones, then land on October. The library doorway, the figure in the coat, the familiar line of jaw, the fall of hair. She feels the room tilt. "That's her," she says quietly. "No doubt." Emily, weeks before her death, captured by a stranger who did not belong in her story. Holt looks away, too late. Hayes sees the flicker, the recognition, the unwilling acknowledgement. "Is this you taking pictures from your van?" she asks. "I liked photography," he mutters, hoarse. "It's not a crime to take a picture of a street." "And of young women walking alone," Malik adds. "That just happened?" "I don't know who they are," Holt snaps. "I don't remember. It was years ago." Hayes doesn't respond. She doesn't need to, because now the officer from the kitchen appears in the doorway with the metal tin. He holds it like a relic. "Found hidden above the kitchen cupboard, Sarge," he says. "Various items, including this." He lifts the small square of red wool, still in its separate bag, labeled on the fly with the address and time. The room's temperature drops. Even Holt seems to feel it. "Funny thing," the officer continues, almost conversational. "You don't strike me as a knitting sort of bloke, Mr. Holt. Any reason you'd be keeping a bit of red scarf in your kitchen cupboard?" Holt's skin goes waxy, sweat beads at his temple. "I don't know what that is," he whispers. Hayes leans forward. Her voice is soft, but there's steel underneath. "You remember her now?" she asks. "The girl in the red scarf, because a piece of one just turned up in your house." He's shaking his head, still in denial, but the sound coming out of his mouth isn't a solid no anymore. It's breaking apart, syllables crumbling. "Graham Holt," Hayes says, standing. "I'm arresting you on suspicion of the murder of Emily Ward. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention, when questioned, something you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence." The words land like hammer blows. The room, the curtains, the stalled TV. Suddenly they all feel thinner, like a stage set. The only solid things left are him and the officers and the evidence bag with the red wool in it. He doesn't fight. His hands go behind his back almost automatically as the cuffs click on. There is a small, defeated exhale, a sound like air leaving a punctured tire. As they lead him out past the neighbor's curtains and the twitching net, cameras have not arrived yet. The cul-de-sac sees, but cannot name, the headline walking out of that front door. Back at the station, the process is mercilessly routine. Custody suite, property logged, pockets emptied of coins, keys, a worn-out wallet. A duty solicitor is called. Fingerprints, photographs, DNA swab. Irony buried inside necessity. He is being sampled against a database already holding DNA from the scarf, which may soon whisper his name back. In an interview room with bare walls and a bolted-down table, Holt sits hunched in a plastic chair. Across from him, Hayes and Malik. A tape machine on the desk. Red lights. A low hum. "Interview commenced at 13:42, Hayes says, clearly. "Present are Detective Sergeant Amelia Hayes, Detective Constable Ryan Malik, the suspect, Graham Holt, and his legal representative." She reads out the name of the duty solicitor, who nods, expression guarded. She lays 3 photographs side by side on the table. The library doorway. Emily in mid-step. Another of a dark-haired woman at a bus stop. Another, too blurred to identify. "Do you recognize these photos, Mr. Holt?" she asks. He stares, lips pressed together. "No." "These were found in your bedroom," she goes on, "in a box containing your payslips from Northline Utilities. Several show women you appear to have photographed from inside a vehicle. One of them is Emily Ward, outside the library where she worked. Do you deny taking these?" He swallows. His solicitor touches his arm lightly, a reminder, a warning. My client has no comment at this time, the solicitor says. No comment. The shield, the wall, expected. Hayes doesn't push yet. She picks up a new evidence bag, placing it gently down like something fragile and dangerous at once. Inside, the fragment of red wool. This, she says, was recovered from your kitchen. Hidden, not stored, concealed behind newspapers. Forensically, we'll test it. We expect it to match the scarf Emily Ward was wearing the night she was murdered. Do you have any legitimate explanation for why this would be in your house? Silence. A pulse ticks in his neck. His hands, uncuffed now but watched, ball into fists on his lap. No comment, the solicitor repeats when Holt doesn't speak. Hayes nods. Fine, brick by brick. We also have a record of your van being logged on Seven Sisters Road the night she died, less than 90 minutes before she's believed to have been killed in an alley just off that road. Witnesses from that period report a utilities van in the area. One woman from the year before describes an attempted abduction from a white van with rough fabric seats, driver in work overalls. Do you deny being in that area, in that van? No comment. Did you ever offer lifts to female customers, Mr. Holt? No comment. Did you ever follow women in your van? No comment. Did you ever speak to Emily at her home, at her library, on the street? There's a flicker. The solicitor jumps in quickly. No comment. Hayes lets a long pause hang in the air. The tape machine whirs softly. Somewhere outside the room, a phone rings. A door opens and closes, the ordinary life of the station continuing. In here, the years are folding in on themselves. She shifts tactics. You like things tidy, don't you, Graham? She says quietly. Your house, your boxes, your photos, your memories. You like everything in its place. He stares at the table, jaw clenched. Except this case, she continues. This one is messy. This one is still open, still hanging, still there every time you see a red scarf on the street or hear someone say, Seven Sisters Road. You can pretend you don't feel it, but you do. You've had decades to practice your no comment. I get that. But here's what's different now. We have science they didn't have. We have a fiber that came from your van. We have a piece of scarf that has no business in your cupboard. We have a DNA profile from that scarf waiting for something to match it. And we have time. We will keep testing and comparing and digging long after this interview ends. She leans forward, voice dropping. The only thing you get to choose now is how this story is told. Do you want it told by evidence alone, by people who never met you, who will call you the defendant and nothing else? Or do you want your own words in there somewhere? A reason, a context. Something, anything that makes you more than the man who put a scarf around a stranger's throat in the dark? For a heartbeat, he looks up, meets her eyes. There is something there. Anger, fear, a flash of what might be shame buried deep. His mouth opens. His solicitor squeezes his arm. Reflex, protection. Holt's gaze drops again. The chance evaporates. No comment, he says. But this time the words sound thinner, less certain, like a bridge starting to crack under weight it was never built to carry. The interview goes on, circles back, presses, withdraws. They don't get a confession, not today. But confessions are not the only way cases are solved anymore. Outside the room, evidence is being logged, scanned, swabbed. That scrap of red wool is already on its way to the lab, to machines that will tease out whether it once lived on the same threads that cut off Emily Ward's breath. And in that lab, when the sample arrives, there is a man who already knows the shape of her absence better than anyone. Daniel watches the barcode register in the system, his own reflection faint in the polished metal of the cabinet, tin from Holt's kitchen, scarf from the alley, threads for science to tie together or prove apart. He closes the cabinet door gently, sealing the sample in. For the first time, he allows himself to think the word he has never dared touch. Justice, not in headlines, not in myths, in data, in chains of custody, in courtrooms where someone finally has to listen. Outside, as evening falls over London again, the first whispers hit the news wires. Arrest made in 1985, red scarf murder. Breakthrough in London cold case. People scroll past, pause, frown, think back. Some remember the old headlines, some don't. For one woman in a small house miles away, the words slam into her like a physical blow. Emily's mother sits down heavily at her kitchen table, newspaper trembling in her hand, the ghost of a red scarf bright as blood in her mind. For nearly 40 years, the story of her daughter's last hours has been an unfinished sentence. Now, at last, the full stop is coming into view. Not here yet, not simple, not clean, but closer. In a cell beneath concrete and fluorescent lights, Graham Holt lies on a thin mattress, eyes open, staring at nothing. In his head, an alley replays. The scrape of shoes, the weight of a body, the rasp of a scarf pulled too tight. No comment. For the first time, even he isn't sure how long that answer can last. The cell door shuts with a metallic finality, a sound that always seems louder when it echoes off concrete. Holt sits motionless on the narrow mattress, his back curved, his hands clasped loosely in his lap. He isn't trembling. He isn't shouting. He isn't demanding release. He's simply still, as if he's waiting for something, or waiting for nothing. Custody officers watch him through the reinforced window. Some prisoners pace, some pray, some rage against the walls. Holt does none of that. He stares at the blank opposite wall as though it is the only thing left in his life that deserves eye contact. A steady blank stare, unbroken. In another part of the building, the case is anything but still. Evidence flows into the lab like a tide. The tin from the cupboard, the photographs from the bedroom, the old Northline Utilities paperwork, the worn-out jackets retrieved from the loft, the dirt scraped from the soles of ancient shoes that look like they haven't moved in years. Every bag is opened under controlled conditions, every fiber lifted, every trace examined under the humming white lights of a modern forensic suite. The red wool fragment is processed separately under the strictest contamination controls. Hayes authorized a rush order. Daniel didn't have to be told to prioritize it. He was already 3 steps ahead, filling out the necessary forms before anyone even asked. He watches the swab boat slide into the sequencing machine, watches the lid close, watches the status light shift from amber to green. Then he forces himself to step away. He doesn't dare stand next to the machine as it works, not when every second feels like a heartbeat borrowed from the past. He moves to a different bench, pretends to read another case file, feels his pulse thumping in his throat. The machine hums, cycles, reads, amplifies. A modern miracle built on grief and patience. Hours elsewhere pass differently. Upstairs, Hayes prepares the file update for the Crown Prosecution Service. She lays out the evidence chain, her fingers moving quickly but her eyes sharp on every word. The law requires more than suspicion, more than instinct, more than the sickening certainty that crawled up her spine when she saw those photographs taken through a van window. They need structure, they need foundation. A photograph of Emily taken without her consent, a scrap of wool hidden behind newspapers, a confirmed match on the unique van upholstery, a parking log placing Holt on the same road at the right time, a witness from a year earlier describing a near abduction pattern that mirrors the alley method, a man who can't meet her eyes when she says the victim's name. She doesn't tell the CPS that Holt's silence felt like a confession wrapped in caution tape. Feelings are for the family, facts are for the court. She glances up at the clock. Malik enters the room with 2 coffees, sets one on her desk, and leans against the wall. "You think he's going to break?" he asks. "Not yet," she says. "Men like him don't break because of questions. They break because of evidence. And because they realize the story they've been telling themselves for 40 years isn't holding up anymore." She gives a small nod. "Exactly that." Malik sips his coffee. "You should have seen his face when that tin came out of the cupboard." Hayes exhales slowly. "He knew we had him the second he saw it. Then why? Because some men would rather drown than admit they built the ocean." At the lab, the machine stops humming. A soft digital ping echoes into the sterile air. Daniel looks up sharply and moves across the room with a kind of controlled urgency, like someone trying not to sprint in a hospital corridor. The screen displays the sequencing results, peaks, alleles, readable markers. The partial profile is clearer this time, stronger, more complete, enough to compare directly against the profile from the scarf in 1985, enough that the computer doesn't hesitate. Match probability, 99.99%. Source, same donor. Not an absolute identity match, only because they do not yet have Holt's DNA results processed. But there is no doubt. The wool fragment from Holt's tin originated from the same scarf Emily wore on the night she died. He swallows hard. His throat feels tight. This isn't closure, but it is the hinge turning, the door opening, the story stepping out of the dark. He prints the report, signs it, timestamps it, scans it into the digital case file, then sends it directly to Hayes with a single controlled sentence. The wool fragment matches the murder scarf. Probability extreme. Recommend immediate linkage. For a moment, when the report leaves his outbox, Daniel rests his forehead against the cool metal of the filing cabinet. He feels something rising in his chest, something he doesn't want to name yet. Hope is still something he fears, something that has betrayed him too many times. In the interview room, Holt sits alone now, the solicitor gone to make phone calls. He stares at his hands. They look older than he remembers them being. He flexes them slowly, as if testing whether they still belong to him. A custody officer enters. "They want you back in interview room 3. Holt stands stiffly. He doesn't ask why. He doesn't fight, but the way his breathing quickens gives him away. He is scared. Hayes and Malik are waiting when he enters. On the table sits the new evidence report. Behind Hayes, the wall clock ticks loudly. The solicitor settles into the chair beside Holt. "Will maintain no comment," he says quietly, eyes flicking between the detectives and his client. "Unless you advise otherwise." Hayes doesn't answer him. She turns directly to Holt. "Mr. Holt," she says, voice calm, steady, and cold as November rain. "We have now tested the wool fragment found in your kitchen." Holt stares at her, his Adam's apple bobs. "It matches the scarf Emily Ward was wearing when she was killed." Silence. A thick, swallowing silence. "I don't know how," Holt begins, but the solicitor touches his arm again. This time Holt jerks his arm away, a small, sharp movement, not rehearsed, not calculated, instinct. Hayes lays the printed report on the table. "This is forensic science, Mr. Holt. No bias, no memories, no assumptions, just facts. That wool was part of her scarf. And it was hidden in your kitchen." His breathing quickens further, his shoulders tense, his fingers twitch as if wanting to reach out and turn the paper over, hide it, tear it, burn it. "Graham," Hayes says suddenly, not Mr. Holt, not suspect, but Graham, with the softness of someone prying open a door. "You've carried this for a long time, too long. 40 years is a heavy thing to hold, and you know, deep down, it doesn't end unless you speak." His eyes flick up. For the first time, they show something almost human. Pain, maybe, or memory, or the first crack of acceptance. Malik leans forward, elbows on the desk. "She didn't scream, did she? Not right away. The alley muffled it. You knew that. You chose it. That's why you drove her there." The solicitor stiffens. "My client has—" Holt whispers something, barely audible. Hayes's eyes narrow. "What was that, Graham?" His voice fractures. She shouldn't have—" The solicitor hisses. No comment. But Holt waves him off, a pathetic motion, defeated, shaking. "You have to stop talking," the solicitor urges. "Do not say another word." Holt's voice rises, the crack widening into a split. "She shouldn't have fought me." The words explode into the room like a flare. Hayes doesn't move. Malik doesn't blink. The solicitor closes his eyes, burying his face in his hands. Holt continues, voice shaking, raw, a man unraveling thread by thread. I didn't mean..." His breath staggers. "She panicked. I panicked. It wasn't supposed to..." He swallows a sob that catches in his throat. "I just wanted her to stop moving." Hayes leans forward, her voice quiet, careful, controlled. "Graham, you had her scarf. You kept part of it. Why?" He covers his face with both hands. Through his fingers, the words come strangled. I don't know. I didn't. But they all know why. Men like him keep trophies, proof, memory, power. He didn't stop being guilty because time passed. Time only made the truth louder. The tape recorder continues to spin, capturing every broken syllable. Hayes lets the silence settle, lets him sit in the wreckage of his own confession. She doesn't push further. Not now. The law will clean up the rest. "Interview suspended at 16:21, she says calmly. When Holt is let out, he doesn't resist. He doesn't speak. He doesn't look up. His story is no longer something he controls. In the corridor, Hayes lets out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Malik rubs a hand down his face. "That," he says quietly, sounded like guilt finally remembering how to speak. "Not a full confession," Hayes says, "but enough." She looks at the printed forensic report in her hand. Enough to charge, enough to frame the narrative, enough to tell the Ward family the truth. Her voice softens. "We need to call his mother." Malik nods. "And Daniel." Hayes closes her eyes for a moment. This is the part detectives never get used to, the part where justice and grief intersect, where a wound is reopened before it can close. But this one has been open for almost 40 years. Nothing they say can make it deeper, only cleaner. As night falls, London hums its familiar tune. Traffic, neon, footsteps, sirens. But in one house, a mother sits at her table with the phone in her hand, staring at it through tears she has held back for half a lifetime. And somewhere in a quiet lab, Daniel sits alone at his workstation, staring at the match report on his screen. His breath trembles, his shoulders shake, not with shock, not with disbelief, but with the first fragile shape of something that has lived under his ribs for decades. Relief. And something else, something he has never allowed himself to imagine until now, the beginning of an ending.